Hawkeye fans, let's talk about health and performance optimization for a moment. Our sponsor, Ascent Nutrition, offers amazing products. It's actually owned by former Iowa graduate Shuttler. Now, I've decided to partner with Ascent Nutrition because of their unique approach to human health. Ascent offers an organically grown, mold and mycotoxin free coffee. It provides a pure, clean, and rich flavor without those pesticides that most coffees are treated with. They also offer an algae oil DHA, which is used to support brain health, memory, and focus, as well as proper nervous system development in adults, children, athletes, and even pets. Now, lastly, their unique crafted wild pine pollen is used to support cardiovascular health, hormonal function, and a healthy libido. Your purchase not only supports this channel, but the business of a former Hawkeye. Visit goascentnutrition.com or click the link in the description below and use the code Hawkeyes. That's the code Hawkeyes to receive 15% off your total order from Ascent Nutrition. Iowa Floor Covering, a locally owned flooring store in Bondurant, Iowa that specializes in do-it-yourself projects. If you're a contractor or a DIYer, Iowa Floor Covering has your back. Right now at Iowa Floor Covering, get tough core click together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring for $269 per foot when you install it yourself. That's a much better value than you'll find at any of the big box stores. Looking for other types of flooring? They can help with that too. Between their exceptional product knowledge and commitment to customer service, the guys at Iowa Floor Covering will provide everything you need to complete your DIY flooring project. So what are you waiting for? Skip the box stores now and visit iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. That's iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. Promotional pricing only available with self-installation. Man Cave Kinnick Under the Kitchen. Authentic, original player art prints are being drawn up for Hawkeye fans everywhere. From Under the Kitchen's Murray Legacy print, which features former Hawkeye Kenyon Murray, current Hawkeye Chris Murray, and current Sacramento King Keegan Murray, to football players Lucas Van Ness, Torrey Taylor, and Cooper DeJean, to wrestlers Tony Cassiope, Alex Marinelli, and Real Woods. Oh, and only one of the greatest athletes to ever compete at Iowa, Spencer Lee. There are so many options available, and they make great gifts. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook or at Under the Kitchen's new website. It's underthekitchen.square.site. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Check out Under the Kitchen today and get your authentic, original Hawkeye print. Well, good evening, Hawkeye Nation, Iowa fans across the interweb. This is going to be a show this afternoon where I let you do a lot of the talking, and I'm happy to provide some thought. But I'll be honest, I didn't expect a whole lot from this press conference today. I don't think a lot of people did. But I think when the reality sets in that everything you expected to have happen is exactly what's happening, I think that naturally is going to ignite some pretty strong levels of frustration, perhaps some apathy. And I'm here to share in you with that because I am an Iowa fan. I'm a Hawkeye fan. I do this show and I enjoy doing this show. We have post-game coverage with Coach Don Patterson during the season. Of course, we do stuff for Iowa men's basketball with Coach Gary Close following each game. But I'm not just here from a business perspective. I'm here because I'm an Iowa fan. And the reason I wanted to start with our sponsors, a couple of reasons. A, I appreciate our sponsors. That's the first part. Second part is, if it wasn't for you watching this show and all of our supporters, plus our sponsors, I wouldn't be here. And I wouldn't continue to do this because I don't enjoy having the same conversation over and 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 over again. I don't. I just don't. Maybe some of you enjoy listening to it. I don't like talking about it. All right. I'd much rather, well, let's not even get into hypotheticals because I guess there's no real point to that. So we're going to spend the better part of the next, I don't know, couple hours talking about this. I'll let people sound off. I know there's frustration. I'm happy to talk about Grant Leaper. You know, I don't want to take away from the the class that signed today. And of course, it was a small class. It's kind of a formality because you have most of the kids that are part of the 23 class or not enrolling, but signing back in December. You have Grant Leaper from, what was he from the Midwest, right? Indiana, I believe, right? He's an Indiana kid, if I'm not mistaken. He signed today. Congratulations to Grant. So we can talk about the class. Rusty Feth is a transfer guy that is now official. He'll have a year left, and Iowa needs him up front. But as it relates to the announcement today that, according to Kirk Ferentz, he expects Brian Ferentz to return, and he expects no changes. That includes, of course, questions about Iowa's offensive line coach, George Barnett, Iowa's wide receivers coach, Kelton Copeland. And, I guess we'll go from there. We've got the phone line open, folks. All right. So a couple ways to interact and sound off, if you will. You can either click the link in the description below. All right. I'll throw this up in the bottom ticker here for everybody. The phone number is 515-635-1601, 515-635-1601. We do have a caller on that line. So if you're interested in calling and sounding off, the best way to do that and not to continue to have to call and wait for it to be the line to be open, you can join by means of the link in the description below. We'll get to your comments in the chat as well, and we'll go from there. Let's take our first caller here at Hawkeye Hangout here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey. Ryan from McGregor.
Hey, Ryan. How are you?
Depressed like everybody else.
Okay.
Understood the press conference went exactly the way I thought it would. No surprises at all. And I'm not even going to discuss it with you.
Okay.
I'm just going to Control Alt or delete that whole press conference because it was exactly what I thought. But I did want to call you, and I wanted to start off your show by going back and talking a little bit about a show you did recently with Mark, Voice of College Football. And you began that show with something that I had never thought about before. And I thought it was very, very important. And actually, when I heard you and Mark discuss it, it really put me at ease. And that is why I decided to call and try to get on early, because I think that you guys might have hit on something really significant here that most fans aren't thinking about.
Okay.
And the thing that you and Mark were dialoguing, which really upset me, honestly, was you were going through Iowa's 23 football schedule. And you were going game by game that they have upcoming. And you guys both were of the opinion that if things didn't change, Iowa would be a 10-2 type football team. And one of you, either you or Mark, said, and if we got a new offensive coordinator, maybe we'd be 11-1. And immediately I thought, Kirk is not going to fire his son, who's paid almost $1 million a year, for one extra win. And I thought both you and Mark kind of shot us in the foot that day by saying that and going through the future schedule, because I don't really know that we're going to be 10-2. We hope we are, but we don't know that. So that's number one. So that's sort of the criticism, and I want to throw that out. But here was the intriguing part. You guys were talking about qualifications for Kirk to enter the Hall of Fame. And it had something to do with him needing 10 more wins in order to qualify for being a sort of ultra legacy coach, on the same level with great coaches like Woody Hayes, Coach Fry even. And it had something to do with the number of wins this year that he would need to be eligible. Can you remember that conversation and clarify that up for me and maybe some of the other fans that may have not missed that segment of your show?
Well, my understanding is a good question. First of all, my understanding, Ryan, of the College Football Hall of Fame is a coach has to have a 600 win percentage. And I had somebody tell me that he was right below that when you include his record at Maine. Now, I went back and did some research on this and was not able to validate that claim. What the numbers that I found, and maybe those numbers are not, maybe I was just not looking in the right place. Numbers I looked at were that Iowa or that Kirk was in the 66 or the 60th percent, not 60th percentile, I guess, which would qualify him, to my understanding. So I could be wrong on that. I guess I'm not a great authority on that, but he is in position for sure. All right, I can say with authority that if he wins, I believe 10 games this year, he would most definitely be, even if the other claim that he's right below that threshold were true. With 10 wins, my understanding is he would be above the threshold. But again, I'm not a good resource on that because that, the numbers didn't add up to the conversation I had with Mark. But it's a good question as it relates to your question about the record or your comment. I don't know that I'm not trying to say you're wrong, Ryan, but frankly, I don't think Kirk's firing Brian if it meant 4 more wins. I really don't. Like,
if I don't either. I mean,
if they had 8-4, if it looked like an 8-win season, and and Kirk was, even if somebody somehow convinced Kirk that, hey, Kirk, we can win 12 games this year with a new OC, and that's we're just guessing, right? But even if that with an improved offense, with a new scheme, with a new coach, with an adjustment in the staff, if that was the claim, I still don't think Kirk would do it because he made very clear during his press conference, and he's made very clear over the course of however many years now, especially over these last 2, that this is, and you listened to the show with Mark, so you know that's exactly where I'm going here. The standard here is 7 to 9 games, 7 to 9 wins.
Right, exactly. Well,
that's what it is. And Kirk keeps saying, here's what bothers me, and there's several things. Part of what bothers me is I listened to Kirk here a few minutes ago talk about how we don't really care what the numbers say. We just care about winning. We just care about winning. And yet there is no concern with winning, apparently. What's that?
Yeah, I know. I've heard that over and over again from him. See, from a lot of his supporters, this year was a perfect season.
So was last year. So was the previous year because they won 10 games in spite of an awful offense.
That's what they want. This is exactly what they want. They want to get to a bowl destination and beat an SEC team and not have to play anybody really good and get a win, get paid, and all the fans go and everybody has a good old time. So really, from Iowa's point of view, that's what they want. And that you can see it in the history of Ferentz's whole tenure that's what it's been. When they get to 7 wins, I mean, the Star Tribune in Minneapolis actually published it, when they got to 7 wins, and they were playing a game in Minnesota, and Ferentz was quoted in the paper up there saying the outcome of this game really didn't matter that much. And I was in shock. I mean, first of all, it's Minnesota, and second of all, every game matters. But that is the goal. It's sort of that way with basketball. I mean, get to the NCAA tournament, just making the appearance is almost all that's expected.
And Ryan, I've defended Fran. I'm a Fran fan, and I know people.
I am too. And I am of Kirk too. But
I think what you just said. I think what you just said is true, and believe me, I have defended Fran in the past. But if this team can't get over the hump and can't make the Sweet 16, my patience is going to dwindle as well. But I believe you're right when you say Iowa's patience will likely not dwindle. Now, Iowa basketball's in a slightly different position because you're not evaluating. Well, I don't think Gary Barta and that football staff evaluate it this way either. But they're not evaluating individual units like Iowa football. You have the offensive coordinator, you have the defensive coordinator, you have the head coach. With a basketball staff, you have a staff. And I don't think anybody's really assigned to coach defense per se. So you either got to make changes at the top or no changes at all. That's kind of how I look at the situation with Fran and the struggling defense and the inability to make it to the second weekend of the tournament. But the bottom line is what you said is true. What I said is true. Iowa's concerned with 7 to 9 wins a year. And when Kirk says, well, as long as we're winning, he should have added 7 to 9 games a year. That's what he should have added.
Right.
And because you can claim, well, they won 10 games the previous year, which is true, right? And they did so with a pretty poor schedule. And frankly, the schedule this year was tougher because you had Ohio State and Michigan. That's why they only won 8 games, but the West was still bad. And USC and UCLA are coming in 2024. The divisions are going to be different in 2024. So we understand all these factors. At least I have firm belief as to why the decision to continue to enable the situation here, whether you're talking about Kirk, Gary, whoever, the donors that are supporting it apparently, or we'll see if they support it, why that decision's going to go awry, in my opinion, or very likely could go awry. But until it goes awry, it looks like we're just going to continue with our head down, plowing forward with what we have and hope it works out. And if it backfires and Kirk's legacy is forever tarnished, we'll look back at days like today and say, Kirk, you did it to yourself. And as great of a guy as Kirk is, a wonderful human being, had conversations with him on multiple occasions. I still have respect for him as a person. I've lost a lot of respect for how he manages this football program. And if you don't like it, that's my opinion. You don't have to like it, but I'm sick of it, just like everybody else is.
Well, I understand it. I mean, he said one time at a press conference, Corey, that Iowa was very fortunate to have Iowa State, Iowa, and UNI all ranked, considering the talent pool we have to draw from. So there's that part of it that always tugs at my heart, because I think Kirk is right in saying that. We're not a talent-rich state, but we have great football players here. But we have 2 Power 5 teams in our state, and we only have 2.9 million people, with UNI also, competing at a high level. That's unreal. I mean, Ohio State and Penn State don't even have that competition in their own states, from anyone else. And we have it in Iowa. We have to draw from outside. So that's why I feel really bad when Erica calls in and she says, well, why can't we be, an elite team? Well, it's very difficult when you don't have a sufficient amount of elite talent within your own state border, like Alabama does, or Ohio does, or Pennsylvania does.
Well, but hold on a second, Ryan.
We have to share.
Let me challenge you on that. Because Nebraska was a power in 1990, and I understand that times have changed, and Nebraska, as of right now, is no longer a power, and they still have this mindset that they can get back there. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But are you telling me that Nebraska's had elite talent within the state, within the borders that created that?
No,
that
they
champion?
had to draw it outside, but they had Tom Osborne, who was able to, recruit, and Frank Solich, who got 10 wins, and they weren't satisfied and fired them. So, I mean, I understand that too. But also Nebraska didn't have a bowl game last year.
I understand.
It's tough. All I'm saying is that if you got a coach that's doing a press conference and he's saying, but I'm not an illusionist, which is almost like an excuse for, well, we can't recruit 5-star athletes. Well, if you don't try, you can't.
Exactly.
Or if you don't want to, you won't. You know what I'm saying? So I'm always torn by this.
And just I want everybody to hear what you just said, because when I use the term as it relates to shooting at times, as it relates to complacency, when I use the term having a defeatist attitude, that is what that is. Right there. Exactly what you just said, Ryan. That's called having a defeatist attitude. Well, we're not going to try with this guy because he's probably going somewhere else, or we're fortunate to be at 7 to 9 wins because, boy, we don't have much talent in the state, and we can't compete with the Ohio State. That's called having a defeatist attitude.
Excuse and mediocrity.
Say what you want about Nebraska, and I get they've got fans that are kind of wild at times, and they've made some weird decisions that have run that program into the ground at times. But you cannot accuse them of having a defeatist attitude. Now, before you say, well, why don't you just go cover Nebraska then, Corey? That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply talking about one aspect of that football program and that fan base that I do appreciate, and it's that they want to be great. And I don't believe there's anything wrong with that. But there's it doesn't appear to be any desire within the confines of that athletic department and apparently within the big donors to be great. They're okay with being good, and that's that.
Right, and that's why, like, I think I could ask Lemanski this. I always like Lemanski when he calls in. But here's what I would say to Lemanski if I was sitting with him and we were having a conversation. Look, you know, Kirk has more wins than Hayden. Hayden is an unbelievably better coach than Kirk is. Why? Because Hayden played Oregon, Arizona State, UCLA, Oklahoma, Nebraska, you know, quality teams. You know, Kirk is scheduling Arkansas State, North Dakota State, Maine. You know, they have a cupcake schedule for their non-conference games, and the Big Ten West is not strong. And you get the 7 wins, and what does that make it? It makes you bowl eligible, but it also means you're mediocre. And then you go to play somebody on the West Coast, and you're told, oh, our players can't adjust to the Pacific time zone. Well, they better start getting used to it, because with USC and UCLA coming in, they're going to be dealing with it, and they better find a solution to that fast. But I'm sick of those excuses, and Coach Fry never made them. And I remember when Coach Fry took the team down to Oklahoma, and these guys lost, and they were patting each other on the back because they played a good game. And Coach Fry said, no, you know, it's failure. You lost. Doesn't matter how good your opponent was. But Iowa has played up or down to the level of competition that they've scheduled. And this has been a problem also. And for that reason, I don't consider Kirk Ferentz is going to coach the same Fry, and never will be, because he's scheduled cupcakes and bought victories. And I saw it, season ticket holder, and I saw the fans cheering just as loud to kill the Maine Bears as they were the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I was actually cheering for Maine at the end of the day, because I felt so bad that those players had gotten a paycheck for their university to get the crap kicked out of them. They had no chance of winning that game, and it was terrible. You know, it wasn't even a fair game. I've always said, you know, Coach Fry used to schedule opponents where they were going to recruit, and that was intelligent. And our recruiting base has shrunk instead of expanded. So I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, but I'm just sort of frustrated. But here's what I'm really, where I was going in the beginning before I've had my ADD moment here. But it ends up that I think Kirk's got one more year. I think they're all in at going into the portal transfer, NIL, and everything for this year, and this year particularly, because I think that Mark or you were hitting on something with his legendary status for Hall of Fame purposes. And after this year, they're all gone. Kirk will be gone, Brian will be gone, Gary Barta will be gone, and Iowa football is going to be in a rebuilding mode. And I predict that in a year. We'll see. But that's what I think is going to happen. I really do. I know a lot of people think Brian will be head coach. No, I do not think so. But I think that this is it. And I think that that's what he's trying to do. And that's why they're sort of all in on the transfer portal. That's what I think. Anyway, I'll hang up and let some other people rant. But thanks, Corey.
Thank you, Ryan.
This has been great. And I apologize to the fans out there if this seems harsh, but that's just what I think it is too. So, but go Hawks either way.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the call, sir. All right. Well, let's truck along here, folks. We've got the link. I'll throw it up in the live chat again. The link is in the description below if you want to call in. And you can also call in by means of the phone line. Right now, we got somebody on the phone line, but I'm going to throw the StreamYard link up. Very simple to do that. Just have to basically log in with your Facebook and Google. Nobody gets that information. It's just be able to log into StreamYard and participate. So I just threw that up in the live chat. And of course, it's in the description. All right, let's get to our next caller here. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Lemanski, Corey.
Lemanski.
I think you have, don't you have a backer for your phone line, or is that was just one game only or one show only?
You're talking about Iowa Smokehouse. They're proudly supporting the Iowa men's basketball postgame show. So, but I do.
Well, I
guess
I threw that out to them anyway. I'm kind of generous with your program.
No, they'll appreciate that. The boys down in Iowa Smokehouse in Albia, they are sponsoring a lot of. They're generously sponsoring our postgame show and being a big part of it through the rest of the season. So we do appreciate them. Thank you for giving them a shout out.
Well, I want to tell you we've never needed you more, Corey, for the 2023 season. So try not to be as frustrated as the fan base. And I think what your role is not only appreciated, but it's good for perspective. And Ryan from McGregor is not the only person with ADD. I thought I was having it listening to the show in the car. I almost pulled over to the side of the road, but I'm going to focus on today's press conference to kind of go back and forth with you. Is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah, and we'll just kind of dissect it,
sure.
Or our impressions.
Yeah.
Number one, we have a pretty highly overpaid athletic director. We have accountability to our center, who we moved from the defensive to offensive line for one season. Our accountability to athletic director for what he's getting paid is alarming. I hope we put some focus on our athletic director. Evidently, he listening to his. I'm glad he came on. I'm glad he had the guts to at least talk. But I don't understand, Corey, why our athletic director during COVID did not get in and talk to our football program. It sounds like, he's decided he's going to get involved this year. Hooray, Gary. I'm glad you're going to talk to the program that makes the most money and be more involved. I would think you'd been in the trenches during COVID to help the football program deal with unprecedented stress. Man, that's just alarming to me. Second point, and you don't have to talk about the first point. The second point is, did I hear wrong? Did he just throw down some insults or some to the guy that built the Iowa program that he left the cupboard bare? And look what I've done for the Iowa program since I took over. And doesn't that mean a lot over 20 years? And that's alarming to me that a guy with high character, Kirk Ferentz, the guy that gave him his start in college coaching, really as bringing him into the program out of Pennsylvania, started talking about, God, it was just junk here. And he won one game, and he talked about that at the press conference, and look what he's done. And what does that have to do with the future? The third point is, thank goodness we have a fan base and your program, Corey and Mark Rogers. I'm on the older side of the Iowa fandom, and I like to look back in the rearview mirror and relive those glory days, which is wonderful to even have that ability. Let's start looking ahead to 2024. What are we doing, Kirk? Looking back in your rearview mirror, how many times did he go back to the history of Iowa football? This is a whole new game. This is like going from checkers to chess. We've got people entering the conference, not just Maryland or Penn State. We got USC, UCLA. Look what USC did this year. When did we stop looking forward with our athletic director and our coach? And I want to give it back to you because you have a good way of dealing with today and moving forward, and not being Lemanski and looking back, which is a dangerous thing for an athletic director, a coach, or a fan like Lemanski to do too often.
I will say this, Lemanski, and first of all, you made great points. The comment that Hayden Fry basically left the cupboard bare, that has been stated on a number of occasions by a number of people. And I'll be anxious. We're going to have Coach Don Patterson on the show here in the next week or two, Lemanski. I can promise you that. And I've been promising, we talked about that season wrap-up show a long time ago, and I've held off because I wanted to wait for some developments with the staff. And now that we've had this press conference, I think it's probably a good time to have him on. I know he would vehemently refute the claim that Hayden Fry and that staff left the cupboards bare. All right. And I don't need to give you specific examples, but Kirk, that staff benefited greatly from some of the players that Hayden Fry and Don Patterson and those guys left behind. I can tell you that. You know that, Lemanski. You're an Iowa guy. You're much older than I am. The comment on Gary Barta, you're absolutely right. I don't really know that I have any more respect for Gary simply because he went up there and talked, because it's the same thing we've heard over and over again. And basically, in so many words, stated that Gary Barta stated that it is Kirk's decision and he's riding with Kirk's decision. There was no, I know he at one point said, I have the power as the AD to overrule a decision, but there was no, do you really believe that he would do that, Lemanski? Do you have any inkling to think that Gary Barta would step up to Kirk Ferentz and overrule a decision on his son? I don't.
I would hope he would. I think that's his job, is to enforce accountability, fire the volleyball coach.
Sure. By the way, let me. I want to give you a quote from Gary Barta. I thought this was humorous. Speaking on the qualifications of, and by the way, he prompted this. He brought up how when people say that Brian's not qualified, that narrative is just frankly wrong. Gary Barta said this, and I quote: "He grew up here, he played here, he played in this offense, so that qualifies him because he grew up here and he played here." So correct me if I'm wrong, Lemanski. If you grow up here, and I'm talking about you grow up in Iowa City, apparently, that apparently means you're qualified to lead charge of a Big Ten offense, and apparently qualifies you to recruit across the country, and qualifies you to be able to call plays, qualifies you to be able to I mean, sure, Brian has been a part of coaching decisions on that side of the ball, and playing here. How many guys have played here over the years? Does that mean we've got, I mean, how many hundreds of players, of Iowa football players, have been a part of this program in the past? Like, on offense, let's just stick with offense. We're talking about the offensive coordinator position. We're talking hundreds of players. So because Brian's one of the few that actually grew up here and played here, apparently that makes him qualified. I just thought that was a humorous note by Barta. And if you notice this, if you go back and watch that press conference, you probably picked it out, Lemanski. Iowa has an obsession. And I'm talking, when I say Iowa, I'm talking Kirk and Gary, probably Brian too. They have an obsession with points per game. Have you noticed that? Like, and sure, it's convenient, right? Why bring up yards per game? And I'm not going to have any debate. If anybody wants to call in and try to debate me about how points per game is the better formula than yards per game, whatever. You have that opinion, that's fine. We've said this, talked about this many times. We've talked to Coach Patterson. It's got to be a combination of both. There's a number of metrics you have to look at. And points per game is an easy cop-out when you have one of the most productive special teams units and one of the most productive defensive units in the country. It's a cop-out. And Kirk continuously brought up points per game. Gary continuously brought up points per game, even though points per game has even points per game has proven. I saw somebody commented that here a few minutes ago, that points per game wise, Iowa's been awful. Thomas says Hawkeye scoring was 40th at 31.8 points per game in 2020. That was the COVID year. They were 99th last year. And I'm guessing Thomas, I have no reason to doubt his authenticity on this. I'm guessing he grabbed this from an official database. Thomas says Ferentz's offensive coordinator in 2017, Iowa's season-ending total offense has been no higher than 87th nationally and has been 99th or lower in 3 of 5 seasons. I believe that information is accurate, but yet that's the most convenient narrative that Kirk and Gary can use, or defense that they can use in reference to retaining Brian and keeping the staff the way the staff is in place. And by the way, not only did we find out today that the plan is to bring Brian back, and the plan is to bring everyone else back. We also found out today that there are no major overhauls with the scheme. Now, I know some people think it's laughable that we ever suggested it, but the whole reason we brought that up on a number of occasions is because it's clear to a lot of people that there needs to be big, big changes. And if you're going to continue with the coaching staff, I would think you would you would counteract the shortcomings your staff has had with a change in philosophy, with a change in schematics. But what I was saying right now, Lemanski, is that this was purely personnel related, purely personnel. So Kirk brought up the wide receiver room. He brought up Charlie Jones. He brought up Keegan Johnson's injury. He brought up Brody Brecht and his unique situation with baseball. He brought up the offensive line. He said, quote, they were forced to play guys who weren't yet ready, end quote. He brought up the quarterback position and actually kind of defended Spencer. So basically what he said is that it was the wide receiver room and especially the offensive line. And I didn't hear a single ounce of accountability for Brian, for the staff in general. He doubled down on the fact that he believes his staff is doing a really good job. In fact, when he was asked towards the end of the press conference, he was asked specifically about what his evaluation found as it relates to Brian Ferentz. He lumped Brian. Did you notice, Lemanski? He lumped Brian and Phil Parker together, and he said, I think they both did really well. Did you like that?
I laughed after the press conference ended because I was trying to figure out what do the performance of Phil Parker and Brian have in common.
Say that again.
I mean, I was trying to figure out when he lumped in Phil Parker in the same sentence with Brian and his evaluation of his coaching staff overall did a good job, what the similarities of performance were between Phil and Brian. I thought I had a brain hemorrhage.
He is evaluating it on a metric with a formula that is unknown to anybody that follows. I'm just there is no formula. He's evaluating the entire team based on wins. He is evaluating the entire staff based on how many games they win. And the one offensive metric that he kept bringing up, points per game, is not even purely an offensive metric. I saw somebody asked in the chat, Steve says, I'm curious on the points per game stat. This has to be with defense and special teams added in. Yes, of course it is. Yes, it is. And I know some people have argued, well, that doesn't make much of a difference. Well, again, you go back, especially in the Phil Parker era, and look at how productive the defense and special and LeVar Woods, let's not discount LeVar Woods, how productive those two units have been. They score more points collectively than probably any other pair of special teams defensive units in the country. I would venture to say they've probably been top 10, I don't know, probably at least the last 2 to 3 years, at least. I would be curious to go back and try to actually find those numbers and find that data. But I think anybody with a decent memory of Iowa football in recent years would validate that. So the bottom line is Kirk is using a formula and an evaluation process that is that defies logic. In my opinion, it just completely defies logic as it relates to how you should be evaluating 3 separate units.
Any other thoughts that you have about the news conference? I'm going to keep it specific to that.
Oh, I got lots of thoughts, Lemanski, but that's why I'm on here for 2 hours.
Well, they'll probably come out with other callers, and I want to get out of here and be respectful to Hawkeye fans who are some of the most loyal in the country. I guess the other thing that the comments out of Kirk from the Ohio being challenged by an Ohio State news person, some of his responses today, I will leave with this one that I can't leave alone. I don't ever remember my father, and I work for my father in a business, say publicly to his staff, well, my wife thinks this, and she's pretty smart, and this is her evaluation of what goes on. I don't know if that's, as a professional, when you've got a son hired in Iowa football, now we're going to talk about my wife and her support of the program. I just wish Kirk could come forward with something, some accountability. You know, we're going to really got to look harder about our Iowa offense. And you know, I just wish he would acknowledge the shortcomings in a more public way, so at least we think it's in his brain. I just, it's like he surrounds himself in a fort.
It may not be, Lemanski. It's one of two things. Either Kirk is legitimately in denial. He actually believes that that this entire staff is doing a terrific job, and Brian is not at all to blame for the issues, or he's just desperately trying to protect his son, and he's doing a pretty bad job of doing that, if that's what his aim is. But it's one of the two things. Perhaps he actually believes what he says. That's very possible. I don't think Kirk would lie, but I think maybe, you know, when you're trying to protect your son, you're going to use an argument that's convenient and that could somehow you could reason somehow has legs. I believe it does not, but it's one of those two options because logic is not on the table.
The only support that the assistant coaches have is Gary Barta. You have to be pretty naive to think Phil Parker is going to bitch too loud, or any of those assistants. So we got to pray to God that Gary Barta has sat down with Phil Parker and says, we're trying to fix this thing. Hang in there. Don't retire. And I'm going to get off the show out of respect for the other Hawkeye fans. And I hope those conversations have been had with Gary Barta and his assistants. And I was appalled. The worst thing I heard was now Gary Barta is going to be more involved with COVID occurring back then. I thought that was a bad comment by Gary Barta. Thanks for your fandom. Thanks for therapy. Thanks for being an Iowa fan in Ames, which can't be easy. And my drinking volume might go up this year. I'm pretty certain of it. Have a good show.
Lemanski, thank you for the super chat as well, sir. Lemanski says in the super chat, he says, Corey, the fans never needed you more. We need you for our fandom. Let's get to our next caller, and then we got Chris on the line as well. Let's get to our first caller who's on the phone lines. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Yeah, this is Zach Moore. How's it going, Corey?
I'm good, Zach. How are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for doing what you do, and I just want to have everybody give you a thumbs up today for the video.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Yep. I don't know if you've seen that post of like the how Iowa has finished every year under Kirk. I've sent it to you on your Twitter. I don't know if you can bring that up for everybody.
Let's see if I can bring that up for everybody. This is something that you sent to me on Twitter?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yep. And I've shared these numbers before, but we can go ahead and let me see if I can go ahead and throw these up on the screen so we can know what we're talking about here.
Well, I just want to like bring it up how there's this one, and then like if you go and look at the one for defense in the last 5 years, it's like outrageous. It's completely outrageous how Kirk even said that or even put Brian and Phil under the same category, because under Phil, he's never been worse than fourth in like the last 5 years or 4 years under the four things. I have it right here. One sec.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So here is I'm throwing it up on the screen for everybody right now. These are I see you screenshotted this, so these are accurate numbers. These are, of course, total offensive numbers. And again, I just want to go, as we look at these, let's just remind ourselves that this is not the metric at all that Kirk looks to. He does not believe in yards per play whatsoever. So let me I'll get rid of this current comment here. We'll get rid of the banner, and then we can discuss this. All right, there are the numbers. You're not gonna be able to see me. I guess I can slide over this side. All right. Yeah, so these are the numbers, and of course, I thought it was funny. First of all, before you say what you have to say, Zach, I'm glad you threw this to me, because Gary, was it Gary that made a comment? I think it was Gary Barta that made a comment about how Iowa has never had, under Kirk, we've never had a top 30 offense. Did you catch that comment?
Yes, I did.
Well, 2002, even in total offense, which is supposed to be, deflated or maybe even inflated, I guess would be the right term. They were in total offense. They were 13th in 2002. In total offense, they were 22nd in 2005. In total offense, they were 27th in 2006. So there you go. You got 3 years right there where Iowa was top 30, one of which they were top 15. So now I don't know where they ranked points per game in those years, but I would guess that they were fairly high in each of those years.
Yeah. And, but if you look at the last 5 years of Brian, I mean, it's completely outrageous how bad we have been. And then he wants to say about Phil or talk about Phil, like, you know, about they are both good. But Phil, in the past 5 years, for points per game in Big Ten, they're number one. Yards per play, they're number one. Yards per carry, number one. Yards per completion, number one. Yards per attempt, number one. Interceptions, number one. Defensive pass efficiency, number one. Takeaways per game, number one. And explosive plays, number one. That's for the Big Ten. And for the FBS, they're number 2, 1, 4, 4, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1 in the past 5 years. That's just insane to have such a good defense, and then on the other spectrum of the ball to be that bad. You know what I mean? It's just crazy. Yeah. And then Kirk wants to keep Brian under, like, I don't know. It's just I don't even know what to think of it because it's just outrageous. It's crazy. I don't know.
I agree with everything you just said, and those numbers. I'm glad you gave me those numbers because there's an opportunity to highlight what we've highlighted a number of times. And even if you believe that total offense is not a good indicator, you can see the drop off. Even, I mean, say what you want about Greg Davis coach teams, and I know they had their issues. And Greg Davis was a drop off comparatively when you look at Ken O'Keefe's tenure here as well, and his numbers. You could argue Greg Davis was more successful as the coordinator than Brian. And neither one of them were very good here.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just that, like, you have to take a step back and ask yourself if the game has just completely passed Kirk up. You know what I mean? If it's just his time to go, like, I don't want to see it, but I mean, I'm sure half of Hawkeye Nation doesn't want to see it, but I mean, the time's coming, I think, you know?
You're not the only one that feels that way, Zach. I can tell you that.
Yeah, but I just want to call and have you post those numbers for everybody, but I want to say thank you and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate the call, sir. Yeah, good stuff. And again, we've had 3 callers already, and I can sense the frustration, and that's okay. That's what the show is for right now, for people to be able to vent. I appreciate the super chat I appreciate all the super chats, the donations. I know when people are upset, you're probably not in a real giving mood. It does help immensely. It's what supports this show along with our sponsors. So please continue to consider donating if you are able. Of course, you can do so by means of super chat, or we have links to PayPal, Cash App, Venmo in the description below. But Eisman57 says state employee Brian's income is listed online. In 2022, his gross pay was $1,122,083. Since Vito Corleone hired him in 2012, he has pocketed over $6 million of Iowa taxpayer money. This blank is outrageous. Those are all facts. Let's get to Chris, who's been on hold. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Corey, how we doing?
Doing all right, man. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. What a day. So where to begin? I guess first thing, at the end of the press conference, this is something that pissed me off. When Kirk was going on some whatever diatribe about recruiting or whatever, he brought up like top 5 or top 10 programs. He's like, I'm not looking to get into that stratosphere anytime soon. It's like, so what are we even doing here? Like, what is the goal here? We're just sitting here.
What did he say? What did he say at the end? I missed that.
It was something around, it might have been recruiting based, but it was pretty much like how they don't play in that ballpark. So I guess it could be like NIL related. So that's one thing, but it was just, the connotation I got was like, we're never going to be in that top 5, top 10 team ballpark. So it's like, shouldn't that be the goal? Like, what if we had a new coach, or if like another program, like they just openly say like they're not trying to be the best? It pisses me off, especially even when we were number 2 in the country last year. Kirk's like, well, we're not that good, so don't get too excited. He said that after the Penn State win. It's like, that's just so frustrating. Like, go for it. Why are we not trying to be the best? I don't understand that. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Well, let's be honest, Chris. Did he really need to say it? Did he need to
Yeah, I
verbalize it
guess
for
so.
you to realize that the priority within the confines of that football program, priorities are not centered on how can we be elite? That's never been a priority.
Absolutely.
Not under Kirk.
Yep. No, that's a very good point. So another thing that pissed me off, just the narrative that the coaches aren't responsible for the roster. Like the coaches had a tough season because the players were bad. You're the one who brings in the players. Why did we not find a quarterback this past season? We saw 2021. We saw it was an issue. They did nothing. And now we are in 2022 and he says, oh yeah, we had a bad roster. Well, figure that out. That's your problem. You're the coach. That's your coaching staff. It's insane what is allowed to go on in this program.
And the bottom line is, just not to interrupt you, but the accountability thing, that is a fair point for all of these specific discussions, because when you bring up the fact that personnel, I mean, especially in college, coaches are responsible for personnel, and I understand now NIL's playing a role. Ironically enough, now NIL has played a role after the Iowa struggle. So I was having problems before NIL. Obviously, we're seeing the results of that. But the idea that the players are basically solely to blame here, or and let's be honest, Kirk brought up injuries. He brought up Cody Ince, and he brought up these different guys who have walked away from the program for various reasons, and they have had some unfortunate things happen. But the bottom line is what you just said is true. Iowa is in charge. The coaches are in charge of recruiting. They're in charge of developing. And they had an opportunity last year, as you brought out, to go get a quarterback in the portal. They chose to sit on their hands, regardless of, I know the report has been out there that they contacted Adrian Martinez. Oh, okay, fine. They contacted Adrian Martinez. That's fine. They didn't make a hard push.
Tommy DeVito for Illinois. You could have got that guy last year. He would have been a big improvement.
There were dozens of quarterbacks that would have been an upgrade. Dozens, literally. Yeah. They would have been an upgrade from Spencer Petras. I'm sorry. That's just a fact. I think that's you just look at the numbers across the country, and you'll find dozens of players that were in the portal last year, numbers wise. And I know there's a difference when you get to the Iowa system. I get that. It's not apples to apples always. But Iowa chose to sit on their hands last year via the portal. And one argument, one explanation for why Kirk doesn't blame Brian for that is because he was probably a bigger part of that decision. Kirk was probably a bigger part of the decision to double down on Spencer and to not make a push for a quarterback a year ago. So what's he going to do? Where does the accountability lie? Well, now it's got to be Gary Barta that says, well, if Brian's not responsible for not doing that, then why didn't you, Kirk? But Gary refuses to do that. Gary's not interested in holding Kirk accountable, right? Every time anything gets brought up to Gary about the shortcomings of Brian, the shortcomings of the offense, what does Gary do? He refers back to Kirk's 24-year record. That's what he does, time after time. It's the last 24 years. He's built a lot of confidence in me. He even brought up today how most coaching staffs, most administrations don't have 24 years as a sample size to evaluate their staff, or their head coach at least. And I was in a unique position, and that's the fallback. So,
this is unpopular, but Brian is kind of a scapegoat. This is Kirk's baby. He is running this program. I really don't think much would have changed with a new offensive coordinator, because Kirk would have never let them really be an offensive coordinator. Everything is under the premise of Kirk Ferentz football. It's been this. We've had 3 coordinators now. They've all been super unpopular. Brian's particularly bad, but this is Kirk Ferentz football as long as he's here.
I can agree with you that these coaches are operating under the confines of a Kirk Ferentz philosophy and a Kirk Ferentz offense. I don't buy the people who say that Kirk is there calling plays on game day and constantly overriding what Brian's doing. This is still, I think you could make the argument that Kirk has hired 3 well, I'd say probably 2 offensive coordinators that were mediocre at best, and 1 in Brian that had virtually no qualifications to be a play caller or an OC. And so he's had 3 coordinators over the course of a 24-year career. You could argue he's just hired poorly. I mean, I don't know that means he's micromanaging everything. You're right about the philosophy and the scheme, and Kirk made that clear today that that's what he believes in. But I also believe there are plenty of other coaches out there, Chris, that could coach and coordinate an offense to a much more effective degree within those confines. And I'll give you a perfect example of somebody who could probably do that. It's Paul Christ. Paul Christ could probably come
I was
here.
going to say that. Yep. If you were
and
serious.
within those same confines, he could coach I think a much better offense. And so I agree with you to an extent on that. I hear a lot of people bring out how, well, it's Kirk's offense. Let's not just use Brian's as a scapegoat. They both deserve blame. Yeah.
One last thing. So the points, if points is the metric, just really quick one through the schedule. In our losses, we scored 7, 6, 14, 10, and 17. And who knows how many defensive touchdowns were in that boat. So if that's their new metric that they use, points per game, that's a really good one. We're really doing well there. 5 losses, all under 20 points. Like, this is 2023 college football. Like, did you watch the bowl games? I mean, we're not going to be that. I mean, yeah, it's just insane. Like, I'm not asking to score 50 points a game, but I mean, 20 would be nice. And last thing, and then I'll let you go. I don't think anyone should ever say another bad word about Caden Proctor. Like, why would he have come here if he knew if Brian was sticking around? You could say whatever about the money, but I mean, beyond the money, why would you want to come here as an offensive player? It just is, it just makes no sense.
And can I comment on that real quick?
Yeah.
Chris, I was disappointed with Caden Proctor leaving as well. What I thought was funny was when Tyler Barnes is up there talking about how Iowa was able to flip Dejon Parker after he had already committed. He was already in. He'd already been accepted into Virginia. He was accepted into Virginia. Now, granted, he's a transfer. Proctor was a high schooler. He was accepted into Virginia, and Barnes even used the term poaching. He said, well, we don't usually, pride ourselves in going and poaching kids. So we acknowledge that they're poaching kids, and yet I'm not saying Iowa has been sour grapes on, in front of the media about Caden Proctor. And in fact, I think they've been fairly gracious about that whole situation, which good for them for that. But the fans out there that were upset about the Caden Proctor situation, and a few weeks later or a couple of weeks later, Dejon Parker is added after having been accepted, and he's actually on the Virginia website. I just find that humorous. And he plays the same position as Proctor.
Yep. Double standard by Hawkeye fans for sure. All right. Thanks, Corey. Appreciate it. Thanks for the vent session. Have a good one.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Thank you, Cole, for this. I appreciate you being here, even though you're a Nebraska fan. Do appreciate that. Appreciate all of our premium subscribers who are here. Erica, the Organic Veil Radio, Zach, who called in earlier, Lemanski, Dennis. I know I'm going to miss some. Lollyq. Thank you all for being here. And if I missed you again, it's because I don't see your comment in the chat. It's nothing personal. David Alexander, thank you for being here. You all are a big part of it. And of course, all of you watching, but our premium subscribers, for your extra support, Cole Stipulate is here as well. Let's add our next caller to the show here. Thank you for calling. Well, no, I know who it is because it says Alex. Welcome to the show, Alex.
How's it going, sir? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I'm actually driving home right now. Don't worry, I'm not looking at my phone. It's down. I'm just using the car speakers, so I am driving safely. 2 hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. I don't want people getting all up in arms about that.
Yep, I appreciate you calling in.
So it's been a while, but so I was at work, so I didn't hear the press conference, but I've been listening to the show, and from what I'm getting, obviously, from your title and what people are saying, pretty much it's the same thing as what we saw last year, and it's to me this shows this lack of spine that Gary Barta had, because if Gary Barta either keep Brian or get rid of him because they signed a contract, because Kirk Ferentz is Brian's father, he has no say because of nepotism. Now, and I have an inkling where Kurt's like, either you get rid of Brian and I walk too. So it's either you keep him and I'll stay, or you get rid of him and I'm going to walk too. And with, I don't know how much Kurt's buyout is, but it's at the one, but he might be hanging that over Gary's head. I don't want to sound so negative about it, but it's just like there has to be something there to where it's like you can't ignore the lack of results that this offense has produced, and just kind of turn the other cheek, so to speak, and think everything's hunky dory.
Alex,
go ahead.
I believe Iowa's buyout as of last summer, Iowa's buyout with Kirk. You want to guess what it was?
I know it's in like the millions, but I'm not quite sure.
$48 million.
Yeah.
$48 million to buy Kirk out as of last summer.
Yeah, and I think there's been a part that and maybe I've missed it. Either you've said it or one of the other callers have said this, but it's ultimately what is, if you break college football down or look at it in a macro kind of lens, what is it? It's essentially it's a business. College football is a business. You get more eyeballs, you get more money. Okay, so that's why you have the Ohio States, the Alabamas, who have just like feel like they have a wealth of money. Well, Iowa's kind of in a realm where they get a lot of eyeballs on them because of just Iowa. The Iowa Hawkeyes are like the Iowa NFL team. That's just what they are, because they're a decent football squad, and they're the only thing we have close to an NFL team. So what I think what's really going to wake up either Gary or this entire athletic department is the saying of people. I think it's people pay with their feet or something like that, where people stop going into the stadiums, stop buying tickets, stop buying concessions. People say, hey, we're not doing this until you guys make a change, then nothing's going to happen. And if I get offered tickets to a Hawkeye game, I'm probably going to go because I don't go to too many, and it's fun to see, go to Iowa City and have that experience. But, it's one of those to where season ticket holders are just, we got to say, you know what, I'm not giving you any more of my money, because we've had the expectation of mediocrity, and, we want more now. And until something like that happens to where you hit their pocketbooks, I don't think change is going to happen until Kirk retires. Unfortunately, that's what's going to happen. O'Brien gets offered a job in the NFL. And you brought up the Caden Proctor situation, and I know people were salty about that. And then we got another guy from Virginia. My whole thing on that is Caden Proctor is a very high 5-star kid from Iowa, which we don't get a whole lot of 5-star kids from Iowa. And you're comparing him to, I don't know what the guy from Virginia's, what his star rating was. I think it was 3, if memory serves correct. You're comparing a 5-star to a 3-star, which there are hundreds of 3-stars, only very few 5-stars. So I don't like the whole people like, oh, you get mad when Alabama steals Proctor, but you sold this kid. And he's a 3-star. There's 1,000 of them out there. Go find one. 5-stars are incredibly hard to find, and when you have one committed and all of a sudden he flips, it hurts a little more, especially for a team like us.
I understand it hurts, Alex, but I'm saying you can't be salty. I don't think you have a right to blame Proctor because he was a 5-star recruit over Dejon Parker, who wasn't.
No. I'm not. I'm not. I'm targeting some of the fans who are calling Iowa fans out, saying like, "Oh yeah, you get mad when Caden Proctor flips, but then you're willingly to take this Parker kid that committed to Virginia." That's who I'm calling out. I'm not calling out Caden Proctor.
Well, I understand
if that makes sense.
Yeah, but Alex, the fans, a lot of those fans have directed their anger toward Alabama and toward Proctor, not towards Iowa.
Yeah, but you get people. I'm just going at the.
As upset as people are with Brian Ferentz, at least what I've seen on social media since Proctor decommitted, flipped to Alabama, the blame has been directed towards him and Alabama. And I mean that may be. Perhaps Iowa did everything they could. I know I've told our viewers what I was told about how that last visit in Caden Proctor's home went, and I believe that to be true because I've heard a similar account from the Iowa coach's perspective about what happened. So I don't know where the blame lies, but I'm just saying I agree with there's no reason to be salty. I don't believe there's any reason to be salty toward Proctor and toward Bama if you're going to openly accept a kid who did the same thing to another Power 5 program in Virginia. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, hold on. I don't know if you can hear me. I think I may have lost you. Give me a second.
I can hear you. Yeah. Rio Family Fishing wants to know if anybody has anything positive to say. I don't think there's a whole lot of positivity around Hawkeye Nation today, and that's unfortunate because there was a couple players who signed on today. One in which being Rusty Feth, who's a grad transfer, another being Grant Leaper, tight end. But you almost wonder. It's almost unfortunate that Kirk chose to make the announcements he made today on the same day as signing day. I understand why he did it, but it did kind of overshadow those recruits. Can you hear me, Alex?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna stay. I just got a couple more comments to add, but
Okay.
I think this is Kirk's last year. I think he's kind of go with this team, and then at the end of the year, bowl game or not, he goes, "Hey guys, I'm gonna bow out. This is my last year. And then you can do what you want with the program." That's what I believe. I'm not advocating for Kirk to get fired. I think he's still a great coach, but I think these last couple of seasons have really shown his stubbornness and his lack or his inability or his what's the word I'm looking for? His resentfulness to change. Like he doesn't want to change unless he's absolutely forced to change. And we kind of saw that, the last couple years, where he was really, with the NIL thing this year, he's kind of looks like he's somewhat flipped his attitude on that, but maybe not all the way. But I think I think Kirk's starting to I think he's starting to overstay his welcome a little bit. Again, I think he was a great coach, but I think he's starting to get to the point to where it's like I think he needs to know it's time for him to just step back and just ride off into the sunset, so to speak. But anyways, I'm actually at my destination. I have my mom's birthdays today, so we're having a little get together for her. So just wanted to get my thoughts, and thanks for taking my call, Corey.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. Yeah, all good points. And to our commenter, let me find the comment. Bob, Kirk and Brian, I think, will have an all-new offensive scheme that will be a surprise to all of us come September. No. I mean, you have every right to that opinion, Bob, but that ain't happening. But we'll find out in September, but that ain't happening. Let's get to our next caller. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Randy Hansen.
Hey, Randy. How are you?
Good. Hey, first of all, enjoy your show all the time.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
He says, I'm a huge Kirk FERENTZ fan and supporter. I mean, I'm just grateful for everything he's done for the program. But my first question is, obviously the offense was terrible. But what exactly do you think Brian FERENTZ's shortcomings are as an offensive coordinator? I mean, is he just not able to develop the talent or call the right plays? I mean, what is it that keeps him from being a decent offensive coordinator?
That's a good question. Great question, actually. So I just want to preface what I say here by reminding you, and if you listen to my show for a while, I've said this on many occasions. I think we all have the freedom to be able to say, "Hey, this is not the right hire. This guy is not the right guy for the job. without necessarily knowing who is the right job, the right guy for the job, right? I mean, I think we can all acknowledge Brian's not getting the job done, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we know how to get the job done. We just know there are other people who are getting the job done in a better fashion elsewhere that Iowa should pursue. I think we understand we're on the same page on that. So I would say a couple of things. Brian came here with no history, no experience play calling. All right. And for a former center, a former offensive lineman who has coached, I believe he coached running backs briefly. He obviously coached tight ends in the NFL. He's not a former quarterback. For him to all of a sudden know how to call plays, I find that hard to believe. And so when he was hired, I remember thinking that, well, I hope this works out. But he's never called plays, and it's kind of a strange hire for a former offensive lineman who's not a former quarterback, who's never called plays, to be an offensive coordinator. So I think play calling, that's a big part of this. Certainly, you could argue that developmental wise, along that offensive line, certainly at receiver. I know he's not the receivers coach, he's not the O-line coach, but he oversees all of it. Those, and even Kirk admitted that today, those two positions have not performed anywhere close to where they need to perform. And you can blame injury, you can blame the portal and attrition or whatnot, but those shortcomings have occurred under the watch of Brian Ferentz. So I always like to defer to Coach Don Patterson. And again, we're going to have him on the show here in the next week or two. He's a former OC. I mean, he is a former quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator who is very successful. He's an all-time winningest head coach at Western Illinois. So I always like to defer to him on questions like that because it's a great question. But those are a couple examples from my vantage point of where Brian has fallen short. And it probably doesn't start there. He's obviously struggled on the recruiting trail. There have been stories from recruits that have went elsewhere that would indicate that they were not impressed with how Brian carried himself on visits. There's a number of reasons why things have not worked out. And I don't think I, as you can tell, strongly disagree with the logic or the idea that somehow they've just had bad luck or they've had bad misfortune over the past few years with players. I think that's unfair to the players, and I think that's unfair to history and data.
Well, I agree with everything that you said. And I mean, and I'm one of these guys, I'm down there in Texas now, but I grew up in Iowa Falls. And the Hawkeye football team just has so many unbelievably great memories. And, I just live and die with the Hawks. My twins were born and raised down here. If my kid ever got a chance to go play for Iowa, he'd be out of Texas in a minute. He lives and dies for the Hawkeyes. But isn't Kirk Ferentz doing Brian Ferentz a total disservice by keeping him in a position where, there's no question he's over his head. I agree with you on that. Why wouldn't he want to go somewhere else away from the nepotism stuff? And you can't get away from that nepotism argument. And I hate to say it, but I just think you can't explain it any other way. But why wouldn't he want to go somewhere else and perfect his craft? I think he could probably develop a whole lot better somewhere away from Iowa. I just don't see. I think the longer Kirk keeps him there, the more it hurts Brian Ferentz's future.
It's a great thought. And for the record, I believe he has tried to go other places. There were reports last year that he was looking to make the jump back to the league because he was fearful that he was damaging his father's legacy. And this year there was, I reported this a month ago, and I know I'm not the only one. There were strong rumors, strong reports that Brian was looking to get back to the league. But you got to remember, he still has this lawsuit hanging over him. His resume doesn't look all that good because this offense has been the laughingstock of the country, especially this past year. He's hard to hire right now. And the bottom line is he's not going to resign. He's making almost $1 million a year to do what he's doing. So you really going to resign? If he got a job in the league, maybe he would leave, even if he took a somewhat of a pay cut. But if he's still making, $500,000, $600,000 a year, you could probably deal with that. But to resign with a lawsuit hanging over you where you're not real hireable anywhere of significance, I think that's the explanation. I believe Brian has tried to leave. He's made some efforts, but he's hard to hire.
Well, I'll let you go. I just want to let you know how much I appreciate this show that you put on all the time. It's my connection to Iowa. So
I appreciate that,
very
sir.
grateful for what you do.
Where are you at
But
down in Texas?
Tyler, Texas.
Okay. So where is Tyler? I'm not real familiar with.
Just east of Dallas, about 80 miles.
Okay, because I was just in Dallas a few weeks ago, so that's why I was curious.
But I grew up in Iowa Falls, and
Okay.
I can remember changing oil on my 67 Chevy pickup underneath the car when Iowa beat Nebraska 10-7. So I think as a sophomore in high school at the time. And I mean, you just got tears in your eyes, you know, that we just turned this program around. So I mean, between Hayden and Kirk, I love those guys, but I do think there's a huge blind spot that Kirk's got going on with Brian FERENTZ. It's just not doing either one of them any good.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. But here's what's happening here, and you understand this as well. They've attacked the portal, and I said this with Mark Rogers when I had a live show with him yesterday. I said there's a good chance, it sounds like what Kirk's going to use, and this is exactly what happened. He's going to fall back on personnel and basically throw the players under the bus and say, we were hurt, we were too young, we were having to play guys who weren't ready to play, which is, I know that's not completely throwing the players under the bus, but if you're blaming anybody, you're certainly blaming the players, putting more blame on the players than you are the coaches. And, you know, he's tripling down. If they don't perform this year on that side of the ball, well, honestly, after the evaluation today, his explanation of their evaluation, who knows? But if they don't perform well on that side of the ball this year with all the added personnel in the portal, then I don't know how you defend it. But I said that a year ago. I mean, I said that, I know they didn't make moves in the portal a year ago, but every time it looks to me like there's no way they can defend it, they find a way to defend it. So I've stopped trying to guess, because this is just what happens here.
The one thing I'd like to see some of the media up there is take on more of because you guys are critical without being personal, you know, and that's what I like about it. But the media seems to give him kid gloves treatment in these press conferences. And that one reporter from Cleveland that kind of pressed the nepotism issue, like all of a sudden he was public enemy number one to Iowa. I think those questions just need to be legitimately asked. And I just wish some of these guys would start pushing that.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is I'm a huge Hawkeye fan. Just on one last thing. One of the things that's turned a lot of people from Texas into Iowa fans, though, is that first quarter, you know, turning around to the Children's Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that thing's bigger than what you believe. I mean, outside Iowa, I mean, everybody raves about that deal. So,
yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I don't have. I wish I had better explanations for what you're describing. I will say this in defense of some of the people in the media, that you're upset that they're not pressing harder. And I mean, I don't think anybody really came to Kirk with hard pressing questions today. They're questions that basically expected. But you got to realize that Cleveland.com writer didn't have to worry about his day job as a result of pressing Kirk. Every one of those.
I just think a guy that doesn't suck up to them all the time. I think you can ask legitimate questions without being disrespectful.
I agree.
That's certainly one of them. I think that's a great thing you guys do on your show. I mean, you lay it out there. It's critical, but it's never personal. You know, it's just factual. But anyways, I appreciate your time, and I'm going to be listening all the time. I love your show.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the call and for the support.
Thanks.
All right. Appreciate our caller there for giving us a ring, and great stuff. I appreciate him calling in from Tyler, Texas. Let's get to our next caller who's on the phone line. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
This is John, Corey.
Hey, John. How are you?
I'm good. I'd love to hear your opinion. Do you think Kirk holds Brian back as far as the offensive scheme, or do you think they think alike as far as the offense goes?
I really don't know. That's a good question, John, but I've heard people who argue both ways, but I don't think anybody really knows unless you're in Brian's head and Kirk's head, because, I mean, certainly you could argue he's holding everybody back because he believes in his system. He believes in he believes in more zone concepts in the run game than gap blocking. We heard that question asked today, and he doubled down on the zone blocking, even though there's rule changes that make it hard to effectively run with zone blocking. So, I mean, there certainly are constraints that he puts on the offensive system, but as it relates to play calling, I don't think, except probably in significant areas. I mean, Don Patterson has talked about this before. In big moments of games, the head coach is going to have the ultimate say. If he wants to overrule something, Hayden Fry did the same thing. I'm sure Don Patterson did at Western Illinois. But Kirk is not micromanaging play calling from a play-to-play basis. So he's not even Kirk Ferentz is not a former offensive coordinator himself. He's a former line coach. So I don't believe that's occurring. Now, would Brian, if he had total freedom to do what he wanted, would he run a spread concept at Iowa? I have no idea. I mean, that's that idea, that claim is out there, but I don't know that I've ever heard Brian. He's never said that he wants to run a spread here. So I think anybody who acts like they know what Brian would want to run is just throwing mud at the wall and seeing if it sticks.
Yeah. One other thing is, if Joey Labus got Spencer's snaps at the beginning of last year in spring ball and fall camp and through the season, I'm purely speculating here, but I think he would have been a better quarterback than Spencer just by in the bowl game.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, one thing about Joey, and I could argue the same thing about Alex. Alex doesn't have the best of arms, and of course now he's going down to SMU, and I'll be intrigued to see how he does down there. But the one thing about Alex and especially Joey is they are considerably more mobile than Spencer Petras ever has been and ever will be. So with all the offensive line struggles, there's reason to believe that anybody with some degree of mobility would have been more effective than Spencer Petras, because the one real positive trait that besides just leadership, when I'm no doubt that Spencer's a good leader, he has a good arm. He's a big arm, but yet Iowa seemingly refused to throw the football down the field, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But my point is, if you're not going to utilize his skill set, utilize a skill set in that room. And mobility is a skill that Joey Labus has, that Alex Padilla had to an extent. So Joey Labus was not ready to play at the beginning of the season. I think that's clear. I mean, playbook wise, he'd been in the system for literally 1 year, which should be probably close to enough to be able to at least know enough to be able to operate. But man, Spencer had been there over 4 years. Kirk was never going to defer to a guy who had been there 1 year over a guy who, even though he's immobile, he's a statue, who he trusts not to make the big mistakes. And I think the way Joey Labus plays just makes a guy like Kirk Ferentz nervous. That would be my take on it. And I don't know that, again, Joey Labus may just have been a little bit slow picking up the concepts and the playbook and whatnot. And I don't really blame Kirk for that necessarily. My blame with the quarterback position more so falls on not going to the transfer portal harder last year when they had all kinds of opportunities. They had quarterbacks everywhere, proven guys in the portal, and Iowa refused to really make a play for one of them.
Well, the thing that I didn't understand was he was always saying, well, he doesn't, he's behind Alex and Spencer. Well, yeah, if you're on the scout team, you're always going to be behind them if you don't ever get the chance to work with the number one offense,
Well, that's the coaches. Anyway. That's the coaches not believing from what they see in the scout team that Joey's anywhere close to being able to be capable of taking snaps with the ones to the twos. That's what the coaching staff wants you to believe. I don't know, because I'm not there every day.
Yeah, that's true. Well, one of the players said that one of Joey's problems was he had a tendency to go off script, and I think that's one of Kirk's number one pet peeves is, not sticking to the program to pull something out and run a different direction. I know I listened to a Drew Tate interview one time, and he said he butted heads with Ken O'Keefe all the time. Ken would send in a program or a play, and he'd say, well, that's stupid, and he'd switch it on the line to something else. And then when he'd go to the sideline, kind of go, what was that? So
Who is this that said that?
Drew Tate said he butt heads with Ken O'Keefe all the time,
Yeah, I believe that.
that he was constantly switching the play at the line because, you know, he didn't care for what Ken sent in for a play.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and Drew had that person. I think Drew butted heads with a lot of people within the confines of that program, just because of how no doubt that Drew's a good person, nice person, but just his personality probably didn't fit into what Kirk typically would want at quarterback. I mean, he couldn't be more different than a guy like Spencer Petras, who is the epitome of what Kirk wants at quarterback.
do you think he fit in the same category with Kirk as DJK, the receiver? Kind of flamboyant.
I don't want to go that far. DJK had some serious issues. I mean, he had some issues, obviously. I don't want to get into his legal problems that he's had. But I think I wouldn't go that far. I think maybe Drew's personality was such that butted heads with people, but DJK maybe had some attitude problems and some other issues. I don't know. I don't even want to really suggest things that I can't completely validate, but that's my understanding of the DJK situation. I do wish that Kirk would be more open to mending fences with people like DJK, because there are people that have come through this program that I think don't have any relationship with the program and with the coaches, and I think that's unfortunate. But I don't think DJK and Drew Tate are in the same stratosphere there.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Corey.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. All right. I do have a couple of super chats to get to, several super chats. If I missed your super chat earlier, I apologize. First of all, I think we got to Lemanski's super chat earlier. Thank you for that, Lemanski. JT says, sent you a tweet on messages. They already lied. Justin Britt, so the reference to JT's tweet, Justin Britt tweeted out at 4:21 p.m., no, I have not retired from football. So I'd have to go back and listen to Kirk's explanation of Justin Britt. I don't believe he ever said matter-of-factly that he had retired from football. He did basically say that about David Davidkov. But I wonder what is going on with Justin Britt, why he hasn't entered the portal. I'm assuming, I would assume he's probably graduating in May, would be my guess, if he hasn't already. So we'll see what he does, but I'm guessing he won't play again here. JT, yes, he has announced that he's not done with football, according to his Twitter. Acriel, we need a better future for the program. Thank you for the super chat, Acriel. A lot of people agree with you. And no one's doubting. I mean, what Gary, everything that Iowa said today as it relates to data, I mean, all of that was, for the most part, true. I don't know what metric Gary Barta is using when he says they've never had a top 30 offense under Kirk, which is not a credit to anybody, really. That's more of a discredit to Kirk's ability to evaluate his offensive coordinator. But for the most part, everything else that they said today, data-wise, stat-wise, is true. But again, what was stated was convenient. What I believe was just convenient to the narrative that they want to portray, that they want to paint, and that is we're going to continue with Brian and with the staff. And of course, Kirk's not going to fire George Barnett or Kelton Copeland and leave Brian Ferentz in place. Can you imagine how hypocritical that would look? So my guess is you're not going to see really any staff changes unless something major happens or guys leave. You're not going to see any staff changes for any of the full-time assistants, unless something happens with Brian, because it would be a double standard. And I think Kirk knows that that's how it would be portrayed, because that's what it would be. I don't think there's any question about it. If you're just getting here, and I'm going to try to keep my voice is starting to get a little bit weak. I've had a long day, but we're going to keep plugging along here at about 5:50 p.m. The phone line is open, 515-635-1601, 515-635-1601. I know it says call line busy. It is not busy, so I'll get rid of that here in a second. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. The phone line is open. Again, one more time, 515-635-1601. If you want to call and join the conversation. What were your thoughts following the press conference from Kirk Ferentz today and the announcement that the plan is to move forward with Brian, with Kelton Copeland, with George Barnett, and the entire staff? We'll talk more about it here in a moment. Let me make sure that I have the right banner here for everybody. Okay, we'll be right back in a moment. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hawkeye fans, let's talk about health and performance optimization for a moment. Our sponsor, Ascent Nutrition, offers amazing products. It's actually owned by former Iowa graduate Lance Shuttler. Now, I've decided to partner with Ascent Nutrition because of their unique approach to human health. Ascent offers an organically grown, mold and mycotoxin-free coffee. It provides a pure, clean, and rich flavor without those pesticides that most coffees are treated with. They also offer an algae oil DHA, which is used to support brain health, memory, and focus, as well as proper nervous system development in adults, children, athletes, and even pets. Now, lastly, their unique crafted wild pine pollen is used to support cardiovascular health, hormonal function, and a healthy libido. Your purchase not only supports this channel, but the business of a former Hawkeye. Visit goascentnutrition.com or click the link in the description below and use the code Hawkeyes. That's the code Hawkeyes to receive 15% off your total order from Ascent Nutrition. All right, appreciate you, Ascent Nutrition, as always, for sponsoring the programming here. Hawkeye Hangout from the Hawkeye of the Storm. And I am behind on the number of super chats, and we've got people waiting to chat with us. So let's get to a super chat here from Ryan. Well, actually, this is I believe, a super sticker. I can't tell because StreamYard doesn't show it to me. Ryan, thank you for the $20 super chat, super sticker, whatever the case may be. Appreciate that generous donation. And of course, that helps the channel to continue to operate and give you a place to vent. Let's get to our phone line. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Hi, first time caller, actually. My name's Mitch. I live up in the Twin Cities. And
Hey, Mitch.
I'm sorry if you've actually gotten this question before, but I kind of wanted to talk about Charlie Jones.
Okay.
His stats from this past season, I got him pulled up, 110 receptions, that's first in the nation, 1,361 yards, second in the nation, 12 touchdowns, tied for fifth. With those kind of stats, and compared to what he had at Iowa, and with Brian Ferentz still staying, like, what does that say about how the offenses ran here in Iowa? Like, I'm just really curious. Like, look at those stats compared to what he was doing in Iowa. Like,
Well, I'll say this, Mitch, that Kirk was asked about. I don't know if you remember this. I think it was prior to the Purdue game last year. Kirk was asked about Charlie Jones and what he's been doing at Purdue. Do you remember how Kirk responded to the question?
no, I think I might have missed that. Or me and my buddy used to watch those press conferences and just laugh at it, and maybe I just forgot.
Well, he basically said that they had seen a lot of improvement from Charlie last spring, and when he left, it caught him completely off guard. Which basically, I mean, what does that tell you? It tells me that they believe they were a big part of Charlie's success, and that he improved exponentially from 2020 to 2021, or excuse me, 2021 to 2022. And they were excited to see this type of production at Iowa in 2022. Now, he did acknowledge the difference with philosophy, with scheme at Purdue. Of course, they're a pass-first offense. We understand that it's not apples to oranges when you're comparing Iowa's offense to Purdue's offense, just from a production standpoint and wide receiver standpoint. But that was basically, I'll have to find that video and watch it back, because basically he attributed a lot of Charlie's success to the growth that he had made while he was at Iowa. What it tells me, though, if you asking me as an honest person who believes that's not totally accurate and totally truthful, is it's a testimony of a couple things. A, not being able to evaluate talent you have on the roster, right? They got Charlie Jones in from Buffalo as a walk-on. I don't know if that was more LeVar Woods and the special teams unit and what they saw with, potential-wise from Charlie returning kicks, returning punts, or if that was more so the offensive coaching staff. But regardless, he was underutilized in 2021. I don't buy into the idea that Charlie made some massive jump in spring of 2022. When's the last time we've seen an Iowa receiver make some massive jump during spring? I mean, we just haven't seen that. So I think it's more about opportunity. It's more about scheme. It's more about development or lack thereof. And yes, he got to Purdue in summer of last year, and was playing within a few months, but that's credit to Purdue for getting him ready. And I wish that Iowa could take a couple pointers out of the Jeff Brom playbook offensively, but that would require some humility.
Yeah, I guess I agree with you there. Well, that was the only question I had. Keep up the great work. I try to watch almost anytime you are streaming here. You have a nice day. All right.
Thank you, Mitch. You have a good rest of your day. Stay warm up in Minnesota.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Minnesota, man. I question myself all the time. Why do I live in Iowa, especially when it's 0 degrees outside and -20 wind chill? But Minnesota's a different animal. So I want to get to CJ. Thank you for becoming a premium subscriber, a member here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. That is much appreciated. And how about the super chat from CJ? Thank you very much, sir. Very much appreciated and very helpful to the channel. Thanks for giving us a place to vent. I really hope your career in media covering the Hawkeyes continues to grow. I don't have any. I can tell you, CJ, I appreciate the donation, and it's going to help the show immensely. But I don't have any plans to join the formal Iowa media. That's never been a goal of mine. This has never been a goal of mine, even when I was younger. Never had any desire to be an Iowa beat guy. I've covered news and sports on AM, FM radio, and that was enough being a part of the formal media. I love what I do now. This is not my full-time gig, but donations like this do help support what I'm doing. And my plan is to continue doing this. I love doing the post-game shows with Coach Close, Coach Patterson. I foresee challenging shows ahead for football, but just like some people express on here that I help you to cope, Coach Patterson helps me to cope. So that's a positive. We're going to put our caller on the phone line on hold. We've got, let's see here, Dean. Dean is waiting in our queue. Dean, welcome to the show. You are muted, Dean. Can we get you unmuted, sir? I still can't hear you, sir. I still cannot hear you. Your it's StreamYard is telling me your microphone is not connected. All right, he's leaving, and I think he's going to come back. So we'll try to get Dean's audio situation figured out here. We'll come back to you, Dean. Let's get to our caller who's on the phone line. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Zach, how's it going, Corey?
Good, Zach. How are you?
Another day. Another cold day.
And for Brian, another day and another, what, $5,000? What do you think he makes per day? What's he making per? Let's break this. Should we break it down? Let's see. He's making about
before or after taxes.
Yeah, 900. Well, what did we say earlier about all said and done about just about $1 million? So let's just do $1 million without factoring in taxes divided by 365 days. All right, another day, another $2,800, Zach.
Jeez, I wish I could get that.
Yeah, and that's including weekend pay, Zach.
Yeah. Geez.
Anyways,
I know I saw a comment. I think you had mentioned. It said, "Anybody have any positive news?" I was going to say, well, we have a top 6 ranked women's basketball team,
and we got an Iowa basketball team, Iowa men, who have won 6 of their last 8. Am I right in saying that? 6 of their last 8 now?
Yeah, because they won 4 straight, lost the 2 after the cancellation, and then
what a game we got coming up on Saturday with a team that's won 7 of their last 8 and a team that's won 6 of their last 8. Think about that.
Yeah, well, in a big game tomorrow night with the women against Maryland, that's top 10 matchup.
Oh, I love basketball. I love basketball. Anyways,
so at what point with the whole football stuff? Because I know we're all a little disappointed. At what point though does the buck actually stop with Barta?
Oh, right. What do you mean? At what point? At that point, we've come to that point right now.
Yeah.
the buck has stopped with Barta a long time ago. And look, I as somebody said earlier, I appreciate somebody acknowledging this. It's never something personal, but I've said on a number of occasions that Barta, I believe, has done a poor job. He has obviously done a pretty good job hiring certain coaches. I think that Fran McCaffrey was a good hire. You look at Rick Heller, he's been a good hire.
Yes.
I mean, he's done good things as it relates to hiring coaches. And people use fundraising to defend Gary Barta. anybody can fundraise to Iowa. I really believe that. So that's not a valid argument. But overall, with the number of blunders with the media and with the lawsuits and with the payments out, and now with this, I'd be very, very content. I won't use the word happy. I would be very content if we got an announcement tomorrow that Gary Barta has stepped down as Iowa's AD. I might even throw a party. I'm serious. I'm 100% serious, Zach.
Well, I think there would be a lot of Hawkeye fans who would be going, "Where is the party? We'll join."
Absolutely.
Because I could tell you a story. I think maybe it was a 16, 7. I forget what year it was, but Iowa baseball had just gotten field turf for their infield. The athletic department had it installed, and I was told the story that they just started with the infield. The outfield was going in the next year. But different shades were on different sides of the infield due to the sun. Well, when they installed it backwards. So I believe they had to pay $250,000 at the end of the year to tear up the field turf and re-put it in.
Yeah,
that's a little bit of a blunder.
So you blame that on Gary Barta?
Who knows? Might as well.
It's convenient. We'll just take the Kirk Ferentz, Gary Barta way out, and we'll just do what's convenient, right?
Well, I mean, Kirk has often said, I've heard him on post games on TV saying, we're not a statistics team. Well, yeah, we all can tell you that.
Yeah,
but,
you're right.
Who would actually be if, and like it's like it would be a nice wish to happen. Who would be actually the one who would fire Barta though?
Well, I'm assuming
would it be the president?
The president. I don't know if the Board of Regents has a say in that. I don't think it's just the president. I don't think. Well, maybe the president can. I really don't have the answer to that question. Maybe that should have been a question to Gary today. Who has the power to fire you, Gary? What do you think Gary would have said to that?
That would have been interesting. What will it take? Will it take fans to stop coming? Obviously, that's what happened with. I hate to mention this name, Licklider. Fans just stopped coming, and it was just a bad product.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem.
Because as you said, what really has Barta done besides? Okay, they redid the end zone to make it louder. Woohoo!
Well, let me just say this real quick. So that is the blessing and the curse of Iowa football loyalty, right?
Yeah.
That is the blessing and the curse. Yeah. You have fans that are loyal, but you have fans who are loyal. And some may say that's how dare you even ensue or imply that that's a bad thing. But when you're talking about leverage, you have no leverage. If the fans show up in droves this fall, and I don't know if they will, I don't know if they won't, because it would be easy for me to sit here and say, well, their fans are just not going to come because they're upset about Brian. If you listen to the show yesterday with Mark, we talked about this. Iowa football is an event. Tailgating is an event. Yep. Saturdays are an event. And Iowa people are excited about Cade McNamara. They're excited about Seth Anderson. They're excited about Caleb Johnson. They love Tory Taylor. They love Phil Parker's defense. So although you might think that there's going to be significant pushback, I'm not convinced yet. Do I want there to be? Yes and no. I don't want to see the players suffer. I hate to see the players suffer for the Iowa coaches and their, certain coaches' ineptitude. I hate to see the players suffer. And if you don't show up to games and you stop giving to the collectives and you stop donating, that hurts the players just as much as it hurts the coaches. That's the unfortunate thing. It probably hurts the players more.
Right. And as you mentioned, I think it was on the show with the collective CEO. I mean, you think of the massive contracts that are about to come. That massive TV deal that's going to come, next year?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, it's. I think a lot of fans would probably say they'd take Barta first unless Brian went too. But I know a lot of fans, at least that I know here in Cedar Rapids, want Barta nowhere near Iowa anymore.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think if you had to take a poll of how of who is happy with Gary Barta, I would guess that probably 70 to 80% of fans would say they're not happy. So whatever that means.
Yeah. Well, who knows? They could go undefeated next year. Yeah, no. But stranger stuff has happened.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of many, but sure.
Well, that's all I had. Again, everybody liked the show. Love what you do, Corey.
Thank you,
have
sir.
a nice evening.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Appreciate all our callers this evening. Our phone line is open. We've got a nice list of people in the queue, so we'll go back to Dean now. We're going to see if Dean's got his audio fixed. Dean.
Hey, thank you for bringing me on.
I can hear you, Dean. That's wonderful. How are you, sir?
Okay, so yeah, I got an opposite viewpoint, Brian, than everybody else does.
Okay.
Because I feel like he could not control what happened with the injuries, situations that came up this year, and I think he did the best he could. He was dealt a crappy hand. It's just like poker. Sometimes you can't do anything when you get dealt a crappy hand.
Sure. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that's a fair argument if we were just looking at 1 year, right? The sample size that we have from with Brian Ferentz, if you want to defend what he did in 17, 18, 19, and the offenses were better in those 3 years, but not exponentially better, not to a point where I don't think that can really be used as leverage in his favor.
No.
We know
I'm looking at.
we know what the offense
I'm looking
did.
at Corey. I'm looking at last year and this year. We started with a crappy O line, which only slightly improved. I mean, if we're going to fire anybody, let's fire the old line coach who we've had for 2 years, who's had an O line that couldn't block, and we had people that turned the wrong way, and we have somebody that's supposed to block this guy, but he turns this way and he's blocking here. And that's where I think it starts.
Yeah, well, no, Kirk is not wrong, and you're not wrong that the offensive line has been maybe the biggest personnel issue. But the argument is also valid, Dean. Who's in charge of developing the offensive line? Who's in charge of recruiting along that offensive line? Who's in charge of retaining players along the offensive line? Big problem with the offensive line is they haven't been able to retain players, and they have had some misfortune. Guys like David Cobb, Ezra Miller, that Cody Ince retiring early. Mark Kallenberger left early. Coy Cronk was hurt in 2020. They've had a lot of those unfortunate situations. But when you continue to see issues with player retention at a particular position, that tells me, hey, we got a cultural issue, or we've got some issue behind the scenes. This isn't just a bunch of bad eggs or unfortunate occurrences. This is a trend. So I understand what you're saying. And maybe George Barnett should shoulder some of the blame. The bottom line is Kirk got up there today and doubled down on everybody, not just on Brian. Brian was the focus of the press conference. He doubled down on everyone. So, and again, I understand he's looking at injuries. He's looking at, guys retired from football. Mark Kallenberger, I don't even know if he's ever come out with a reason why he left early. But the bottom line is none of those guys that left early, they're not alone. I mean, you have a number of occurrences that are eerily similar that tells me something is happening behind the scenes or not happening behind the scenes, if that makes sense. And you're right that Brian Ferentz, anybody who wants to imply that he is the only problem here could not be more wrong.
Right. Hey, Corey, I'm getting double feedback, so I'm going to get out of here so I don't have to listen to double feedback. But thank you for letting me on.
Absolutely. Appreciate you calling, Dean. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, Dean's right. Offensive line has been a huge issue. That was a huge talking point of Kirk Ferentz today. Lack of offensive line development. But again, who does that fall on? You cannot just blame injuries, because I can name at least 4 to 5 players in the last 4 years who have left or who have not developed like you'd want. Iowa had a 5th-year senior playing this year who was not good at all. And Dean brought up guys not knowing what they're doing. He was one of those guys at times that wasn't in the right place seemingly more often than not. So why isn't that 5th-year senior more ready? I mean, you go back to 2019, and I know they had not yet made the change with Chris Doyle and Barnett. they had a couple of, I think, 5th or 6th year guards that were underwhelming to say the least. They've had a number of guys leave the program, transfer out of the program, and that's part of college football today. But if we're going to look at the offensive line, let's lay out the facts. It's not just, well, we're young. There's a reason why you're young. There's a reason when you say you're forced to play guys who weren't yet ready. That's a quote from Kirk Ferentz today. We were forced to play guys who weren't yet ready. So where were the guys that were supposed to be ready? Where were the guys from the 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020 classes? Some of them have had unfortunate occurrences injury-wise. Cody Ince, Justin Britt, those are facts. But believe me, it goes much further than just Britt and Ince. And I did a video, it was last fall, about the issues with the offensive line and where do those problems stem from. And it's hard to pinpoint, but you can just lay out the facts of what happened, and it's just a very odd series of events. And, you could point to Chris Doyle leaving. That may be a factor. George Barnett's not getting the job done. Ultimately, Brian Ferentz is the OC. He's a former offensive lineman himself. Kirk Ferentz himself. Kirk Ferentz is a former offensive line coach. So all of those factors are in play here. And I do appreciate Dean calling, because he's absolutely right. It's not just Brian Ferentz, but the buck stops with the head offensive coach. And if he's not being held accountable, then the head coach needs to be held accountable. And if he's not going to be held accountable, then it has to be the AD held accountable. Right now, there's very little accountability anywhere. Let's get to our caller who is waiting on hold. Tom. Welcome to the show, Tom. Tom, you're muted as well. I hope your audio is connected. No, you're just muted. Let's get you unmuted.
There, you good, Corey?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Me?
I do.
Okay. Corey, I'm trying to figure out what we're going to have for content for the next 7 months. What are you going to do for 7 months?
7 months? Well, we've got basketball through probably mid-March.
Well, on the football show, there'll be callers. This will be the hot issue every time.
No, I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be, Tom. Believe me, I don't want it to be.
Well, Corey, I missed the first part. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying there will be spring practice to talk about. There will be another transfer portal window opening after spring practice, right?
Good for you.
Well, yeah, you guys, you got to make a living, right? And this is part of how I make a living. So it's, good question.
You're going to be searching all year for a different topic.
I won't be searching. There's plenty to talk about.
Well, I listened to the press conference today. I missed the first few minutes of it, but what I can say is it just sounded like a lot of crap. Just a lot of crap. And we all knew what it was going to be, and it sounded like crap. And it's like you talk about, there's no accountability. And it gets old. It is what it is. I think they'll struggle to be better than 8-4 next year. I know the schedule's in their realms, but I don't see anything changing.
I think if you just look at what Iowa's defense did this year and what Iowa's defense did in 2021 and what they did in 2020, do you have any reason to think they're going to take a big step backwards? The schedule is...
Offense won't go back much further.
What's that?
The offense can't get a lot worse.
The offense can't get a lot worse. I don't foresee the defense taking a big step back. The schedule it shapes up to be a more favorable schedule than this year, and they won 8 games this year with this offense. So you may be right, but I think they'll win 9 or 10 games with this offense. But they are not winning a Big Ten. I don't believe they're winning a Big Ten. I don't think they have much of a chance to win a Big Ten title and make any push for. I can't imagine a scenario. I really cannot imagine a scenario without making significant changes to scheme, to philosophy, to the coaching staff, to play calling. And the reason I keep going back to coaching staff, because I don't believe that other things will change unless you make a change with the staff itself. So I don't believe that any of those things I don't think Iowa has much of a chance to make any national push without significant changes. It's not just a matter of personnel, not in my opinion.
Well, Corey, my thing, even after their first 3 games or 4 games, I told people, you can't tell me that we have the 130 worst talent on offense. I mean, Petrus was a 4-star quarterback, wasn't he, by 24/7?
3/4, depending on, I don't know about 4/7, but wherever you look.
But you take a lot of them teams like your Northern Illinois and those, we surely have a better talent pool at offense than those teams. And why are we so poor? And it's all got to come down to the coaching staff on offense.
Or you blame the players.
I still can't think our number 2s are that bad, or number 3s.
Well, if they're bad, if they're that bad, then why are they that bad?
You're right.
You know, that's what it comes. I mean, I know this isn't rocket science. Like people who, you
brought up like Charlie Jones and these players that leave that are talented when they go somewhere else. So they can evaluate talent. And
evaluation of talent is another issue. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, what do they do with it? Not much.
Well, I give them credit for this. They evaluated Charlie Jones exceptionally well, right? Yeah. They found a diamond in the rough at Buffalo, but then he gets here and LeVar Woods utilizes him. I mean, let's give LeVar Woods credit. Charlie Jones did absolutely nothing, or I should say next to absolutely nothing at Purdue special teams wise. He was a star on offense. So LeVar Woods got everything out of Charlie Jones by means of special teams play. But you're absolutely right. What a stark contrast when you look at how he was utilized on offense. That's a fair point, and it'll be intriguing to see how Arlen Bruce does down at Oklahoma State. I'll be incredibly intrigued to see how he does down there. I don't expect him to be the next Charlie Jones, but if he goes down there and puts up huge numbers, what a further indictment on the Iowa staff.
I'm just afraid what we're going to do to our quarterback, McNamara. You know,
no, he's going to be Tom. He's going to be an upgrade. He's going.
Yes, I agree, but he might be a downgrade from what he was. You know, from on his performance side.
A downgrade from what?
We get all this hype that he's coming here, but I'm afraid our coaching staff he'll just look mediocre like the last quarterbacks.
Well, I think the result of the system, right? The system in play, and there's no one claiming that Iowa's anywhere close to the offensive talent that Michigan had during that 2021 Big Ten championship year. So regardless of what Iowa does in the portal after spring, there's no way Cade McNamara replicates that level of production. I don't see that happening in any way, shape, or form. Now, they do play an easier schedule than I'm sure Michigan played, most definitely than Michigan played in 2021, because Michigan was playing the East. Iowa plays in a West Conference that, their West Division. They don't have to face Ohio State or Michigan this year. So that helps a little bit. But no, he doesn't have anywhere close to the talent he had at Michigan. So that will hurt his numbers.
Yep. All right, Corey, thanks. Good show. Good to listen to you.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you calling in, sir. All right, Derek. One positive. Kirk did say 8 wins is not the goal. However, did he say that, Derek? I guess I missed that. He did tout 8 wins for how many consecutive years? So they won. Well, they won 6 games in 2020, but it was because they only played 8. So we're gonna, I guess, acknowledge that that doesn't count. They of course won 10 last year. They won 8 this year. 19 they won 10. 18 they won 8, I believe, and 18. Am I correct in saying that? Let's see, they played Mississippi State, right? They were 7-5, won that game. Am I correct? They at least won 8 or 9 games that year with the win over Mississippi State. In 17, they won 8. They were 8-5, won the Pinstripe Bowl, and of course in 14, they were 7-6. So they've been an 8-win team since. I guess I skipped over 16 and 15, but they won 12 games in 2015, and in 2016 they won 8. They went 8-5, right? I think I have those numbers correct. So they haven't had a non-8-win season since 2014 if you throw out the COVID year. And so Kirk touted that today, and it's absolutely fact. And that is the standard at Iowa. As long as you win 7 to 9 games a year, sounds like 8's the marker, then you're happy. All right. We're going to put our next caller on hold. We'll be right back with you. And we're going to get to more of your calls and comments here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We're going to get a brief word from our sponsor. We'll be right back here. Hawkeye Hangout, more of your calls and your reaction to the news today via Kirk Ferentz's press conference that the staff, including Brian Ferentz, expected to return. We'll be right back. Welcome to Iowa Floor Covering, a locally owned flooring store in Bondurant, Iowa that specializes in do-it-yourself projects. If you're a contractor or a DIYer, Iowa Floor Covering has your back. Right now at Iowa Floor Covering, get tough core click together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring for $269 per foot when you install it yourself. That's a much better value than you'll find at any of the big box stores. Looking for other types of flooring? They can help with that too. Between their exceptional product knowledge and commitment to customer service, the guys at Iowa Floor Covering will provide everything you need to complete your DIY flooring project. So what are you waiting for? Skip the box stores now and visit iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. That's iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. Promotional pricing only available with self-installation. Appreciate Iowa Floor Covering for sponsoring the show, as always, here at Hawkeye Hangout from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Let's get to who is next. Ryan. Ryan. Are you with us? You're muted, Ryan, or your audio is acting up. I can't hear you. Okay. He's going to go fix it now. Now you're muted. Try to unmute yourself. It says you're...
I'm good, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Woo! Okay. How you doing tonight, sir?
Oh, just lovely. How are you?
Hey, I'm great, man. I'm great. You know, it was last night. I called the basketball show, and you asked me if I had any predictions for today, and yeah, pretty much exactly what I thought would happen. What we learned today is Kirk is happy with 8 wins. He's going to die on the hill of Brian. We have an AD in name only who's an absolute bozo the clown when it comes to football. He's absolutely powerless, completely worthless when it comes to any, this whole, well, I'm the supervisor of Brian because of nepotism. Well, how does any AD with half a brain that isn't under someone else's thumb have any full faith or any of that other bullshit this guy constantly spews out? Number 30 out of 131. Okay, well, you know what? He was a little better last year, 123. And a little better the year before, I think, 111 or something like that. It's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. I'm sure they're going to say, hey, you know what? We got it. Are they going to throw Peterson under the bus? We had a horrible quarterback last year. Now we actually have a great tight end. Well, you had one last year.
Hey, Ryan, real quick. Let me just throw you out a conspiracy theory. And you mull it over for a second. What if, and I'm not saying that this is the case, but I said weeks ago that I was told on excellent authority that Iowa was preparing for Brian to potentially leave. All right. I stand by those reports.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say that is, what if the press conference today was Kirk saying what he needed to say on signing day? This is a press conference that was going to happen. And if Kirk is going to retain Brian, this is a press conference that had to happen for that reason as well, right? There was no way for them just to blunder into the summer and into spring, into summer, into fall without having that conversation. So this is a conversation you have to have. There was going to be a press conference today due to signing day, but decisions in the NFL have not yet been made. Bill O'Brien has not hired a staff yet. So what if Kirk said what he said today in expectation or under the pretense that he doesn't expect Brian to get a job, or he doesn't know if Brian will get a job, but Brian ends up getting a job? If Bill O'Brien calls Brian tomorrow and says, Brian, I want to hire you as my O-line coach, I think Brian probably takes that job. And just because Kirk got up there today and said, I have full faith in Brian, that doesn't mean Brian's not concerned with hurting his...
Kirk's not the supervisor. It's Barta. Barta calls those shots.
But Ryan, you're missing my point. I'm saying this very well could be, I'm not saying I think this is what happened. I'm just giving a hypothetical here. This was Iowa's way, Kirk's way of making it appear that Brian leaving is completely his decision. So by them announcing that today that Brian's returning, when Brian leaves in a week, it appears that was solely his decision. Heck, his head coach, his dad, gave him every ounce of respect, every ounce of endorsement a week prior. You see what I'm saying?
No, I absolutely. And
so
I think there's something to it.
Let me just say this. I am not shutting the door yet on Brian leaving. As crazy as that sounds after this, and we've been on the air for 2 hours, I'm still not shutting the door on that, because I could very well see if Brian somehow gets offered a job, which I don't think is likely, but is possible. He may leave because he doesn't want to ruin his dad's legacy. And Kirk may know that Brian may leave, but Kirk doesn't want to paint it that way. Kirk wants to paint it as, we love him here, but he got a different opportunity.
I have 2 points to that, Corey. Number one, yes, Kirk is a very, very influential guy in NFL circles, and he's got his friends, and O'Brien is one of them, Belichick's another, and he's got several more beyond that. The other part of that is the two things that are bothering me. Number one, you got the pending lawsuit that one way or another has to get resolved. He's probably unhireable anywhere else but Iowa.
Maybe.
With that over the head. I mean, look what happened to Doyle. You know, just the allegations alone had him employed in Jacksonville by Urban Meyer for what, 24 hours? And that was done. That very same scenario probably scares the daylights out of Brian and Kirk. You know, if like the New England Patriots hired Brian and that came out, I mean, he would be an on-field coach. Doyle was a on-field strength coach. I think there's a difference between a position coach and a strength coach from a PR standpoint, and that was enough to sink Doyle after one game or one day. The second thing that bothers me is, you know, when there's Barta is supposed to be the buffer that is against, that keeps the nepotism, if you will, at bay. And he's absolutely, completely, positively worthless when it comes to that. I felt this way forever and ever, and I will always feel this way. And I just laughed at some of the comments in the basketball chat when you kind of brought up the football. You know, what do you think the presser is going to be like? There were plenty of people who were pretty optimistic that there were going to be some big changes. I mean, I didn't give that one thought because, you know, we're the only school in the country that seems to tolerate complete garbage because think about the offensive coordinators who have been fired over the years. They're fired because, hey, we're a Power 5 school. We only finished in the 40s and we want to be in the top 20. You're not good enough. We're going to get somebody who can get us there. Iowa fans are hoping against all hope we can just hit the top 100. And I'm so damn sick of this whole, but we win 8 games every year, or hey, look, we had some 10 wins and here and there. Kirk Ferentz, let's face it, I'm going to say the sacrilegious thing that everyone who's a true Iowa fan who understands the truth. Kirk Ferentz is Kirk Ferentz and kept his job as long as he did because the first half of his tenure, he leaned on the back of Norm Parker, and the second half of his tenure, he leaned on the back of Phil Parker. No more, no less. Maybe the exception of 2002 when we actually had a mobile quarterback, runner-up Heisman, good receivers, 2 great running backs, great tight end in Dallas Clark. We were and the best offensive line in school history. We were a well-oiled offensive machine. What do we go? We get away from that formula and we become defense only. Hey, I'm not complaining about our defensive record over the years. And yes, when Joe Schmo is the new head coach of Iowa, I doubt our defense will be as good. But if our offense is better and at least those 2 units are a little more balanced, I think most Iowa fans will be okay with that. But to be complete dog feces from an offensive standpoint for years and years now, that whole shine is purely Norm and then Phil, except for 2002 and maybe another different year other than that. I would say in his 24 years, 22 of his offenses have been pretty average to subpar to horrendous.
Yeah, they have. And the narrative that Iowa is a ground and pound successful rushing team is not really correct. They haven't really ran the ball well more often than not. They don't
because we have all these starting running backs in the NFL, right? I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, fair point. And that's probably a big part of the problem because they've had decent lines in that time period, but I think maybe underachieving tailbacks. No offense. I mean, they've had good ones, right? Sean Green's a really good one. Good. Tyler Goodson was a decent back, but I mean, Tyler Goodson ain't tearing it up in the league, nor will he. I don't think.
No,
against Tyler Goodson, but
Caleb, I think, has a chance if he has a decent line. I could see Caleb being a guy that will get drafted in your fantasy football league. And what that means is he's a solid second stringer, right? He might even be better than that. I think he's our best running back since Sean Green, potentially.
I think so. Yeah.
But real quick before I go, back to Barta. I just love how he seems like this guy of conviction, and he's the end of he's the final decision maker when he's got to push out that women's volleyball or softball coach because we're here to compete for Big Ten championships and that's the expectation and you're not doing it. But because he's so busy, crawling under the desk of Kirk that he is perfectly fine and has full faith in a guy who has went from really bad, 100th, 123 last year. Oh, he only goes to 130 out of 131, and he's just got full faith. I'm sure they're telling themselves all night, hey, at least we got a quarterback who went undefeated in the Big Ten now. And we got a great tight end, and, Lachey's a great tight end who I think is going to be in the NFL as well. But this formula sucks. It absolutely sucks. And there is going to be no creativity. And I'll tell you what, if you screw up a quarterback who went undefeated at Michigan and you look like a slight upgrade to Petrus and you call that improvement, I don't know how a donor could ever give 50 cents to Bozo Barta ever again. The guy he's terrible. He should have been gone 7 years ago, when he got himself into all these lawsuits. He's just an absolute you-know-what show. And I met him 4 or 5 times. Nice guy, huck it up. Makes good money. Get your teeth fixed. You're a clown.
Yeah, all right. But look. I can't. Ryan, what do I pride my show on? I pride my show on constructive criticism and not getting personal. Now, if you're gonna rip the guy's teeth, that might be crossing the line.
Well, it kind of comes down to poor decision making, and not making decisions that are obvious.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I mean by that. Sorry about that, Corey, but the guy is just Barbara Wilson. Real quick, Barbara Wilson. She was the interim president in Illinois. She's the one who jettisoned Tim Beckman, and I hope she's got the courage to see just what a clown show is reporting to her. I'm sorry, but the guy, nice guy, met him, nice guy.
Who listen, who was the AD at Illinois when Beckman was there? Was it she?
No, it's Whitman now. Guy McPherson face. But she's the one who ultimately had him booted. She made the final call. There were some allegations on how he was treating people, and she got rid of him immediately. And she probably had good reason. So I just think at some point, performance. If you're gonna get yourself in lawsuits, firing the volleyball coach or the softball coach, I guess it was, at some point, performance matters. And I'm sorry it's Kirk's son, but that arrangement should never have been allowed. Gary was supposedly the buffer that allowed that relationship to work because Kirk didn't report directly to his dad. But again, one more reason why this is just like how a family business in manufacturing is set up.
Ryan, I appreciate your phone call, and you got me 2.5 hours in, so I had a problem laughing. I'm not laughing at you.
And I know Iowa has an awesome dental plan. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the phone call. Listen, this is not a funny situation, but when you're 2.5 hours into a show that is just incredible to me, here's the bottom line, folks. If you want to take comfort in anything, if you're upset about Brian, we had a caller, was it Dean that called in earlier that was kind of defending Brian? I've never claimed that Brian is the only issue, but I mean, what happens anywhere else in the country if the offense is sucking? So I mean, it's not rocket science, but I think he was right. Our caller Dean earlier was right about there are more people involved here. But the bottom line is the fact that I was not making staff changes, it might make you mad. It might aggravate you. It may ruin your day. Take comfort in this. There is more to life than football. And there are bigger things in life than football. All right. The weather outside sucks. Okay. I get that. So we have very little to do in Iowa at times when we're in our downtime. But I have not died yet. I'm still here on this show. So if I somehow bite the dust this evening and this show goes away, somebody else is going to have to be the venting party. But as long as I'm here, I plan on allowing people to vent and be upset while also reminding you that there are things bigger than football. But at the same time, I'll remind you that the situation here is ridiculous with Iowa football. Let's go to Erica, who's been waiting on hold. Erica, oh boy.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, you know what? I'm living the dream. Sat at my office while I was finishing up work, listening to the presser today, and hopefully I didn't swear out loud. I still have a job as far as I know, so that's the good news. Good. And also, I have a list of stuff as I always do, and hopefully I'm not going to piss too many people off because I think people are frustrated with me calling in and saying the truth. But at the end of the day, that's not on me. They have the right to their opinion.
Yeah, let me just one because Ryan was pushing the limits in our last call. Let me just respectfully ask that you keep vulgarities out of your rant. You're welcome to rant to whatever extent. Just please keep it PG.
I'm usually PG. I don't think I've ever been not PG.
I think you.
I won't talk about teeth, I promise. Although that was a hilarious comment that made me laugh. I needed that laugh. So Ryan, thank you for that call. That was right before me. Thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, then I got stuck in traffic for 45 minutes. That was great to get 8 miles. I love living in Chicagoland sometimes. But anyway, I'm going to go to my list of stuff. My first question is, does Kirk think we're stupid? I'm serious. Does he think we're stupid? Like, that we're just going to keep accepting subpar play and that we're going to accept the excuses that he comes up with that are bogus at best.
But Erica, the thing is I think if you had to put a gun to my head and I had to answer that question, does he think we're stupid? I would say no. However, I think he is not stupid. And I think he's confident that the people that matter will still continue to support the program. And I kind of agree with him. That's the sad thing. Like, I don't, do you really think there's going to be enough pushback, Erica?
Do I? Probably not. However, the question wasn't, is Kirk stupid? I'm not saying he's stupid. I'm asking if he thinks we're stupid.
No, I don't think he does. He just knows he can get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and then that goes back to the same thing again with Barta doesn't hold anybody accountable for anything. So all this is enabled by him. And so I just don't see how it's acceptable. But everyone, I was listening while I was driving home too, and everyone's already talked about that. So I'll just go to my next thing. And by the way, the reason I said the comment about does he think we're stupid, like, we all can see what's happening here. Most people anyway, I'm not going to say everybody because some people will defend Brian till the death and that's their right. Everyone can have their own opinion. I'm not going to deny that to anybody. But that being said, this isn't the first time that Brian had a bad season as OC. There's the quote, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So Kirk isn't stupid. I agree with you on that. But I think the state of this all is insane because we're doing the same thing again and again and again. And just hoping that by some miracle, we end up winning more games than we did the previous year. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And that leads me to my next question. And this is, I'm not being facetious. I'm not being mean. I'm sincerely asking why in the world, and I'm remembering your don't swear because I wanted to say something else. Why in the world did Cade decide to commit to Iowa? I want to know an answer to that because he obviously has a goal of being in the NFL. Yep, money. That's the only thing I can think of. That is the only answer. That is the only realistic answer. He didn't commit because
it's a big part of the answer.
He didn't commit because we have amazing quarterbacks and that we're quarterback. We have a legacy of being a quarterback school. That isn't why. That is not why at all. So it's like, it's just about the money. It's all about the money. And, that could be padded by the fact that he went on whatever podcast that was and said, well, Iowa actually has a pretty good NIL program. You know why he knows that? Because he's making all the money.
Yeah.
So,
keep in mind that I know you watch the show with Brad Heinrichs. There are 2 separate funds or pools that the Swarm can pull from, and one of them, the one does not affect the other. So he's not taking away. I'm not saying you're implying this, but he whatever he got paid, that does not take away from what the other players get. Does that make sense?
Right. No, I understand that. And I'm not saying that is or isn't the case. I don't really have an opinion because, like you said, there's 2 aspects to it, and I don't know what's what there. So I'm not commenting that he's taking money from anybody else or something like that. I'm just saying he came for the dollars, he came for the Benjamins, and that's it. Now, can he actually do something here to help us?
Yes, he will. He will, Erica. He'll help. This offense will be better with him.
I would hope so. And I also am happy that we've gotten some O-line recruits here in the last few days. I think that will help. And, I hope it will be better. Sincerely, I want them to do well. That's why I'm so passionate about all this. I want them to do a good job. But it's just after a year of being a national-wide laughingstock, like I talk about football, work with some of my colleagues who are also into football, and every week I have to answer what happened. Like, why in the world is this offense so horrible? And I'm just tired of doing it.
So So, Erica, you said I don't have faith in that, Corey. What are you talking about?
Oh, that was when you said the thing about how he can still get the job in the NFL. And what if we wake up tomorrow? And I think you said Bill O'Brien was the coach you mentioned, that he could call him tomorrow morning because of the close relationship he's got with Kirk and offer him, some type of TE role or something. I just, at this point, I would love Brian to be gone. I think everybody who watches the Zone has heard me talk about it or see my Twitter page knows that. I don't have faith in them to do the right thing anymore. I don't have faith in the team. And, that's the only hope, is that Bill O'Brien calls tomorrow and says, you want to be TE coach or O-line coach. That's the only hope. Otherwise, we're stuck with another subpar OC again.
I mean that don't get me wrong. That theory is not necessarily flawless, because that still doesn't explain why Kirk is doubling down on everyone else on the staff, because you could argue that Barnett's job should at least be in question. Kelton Copeland's job should at least be in question.
That's true.
Those guys aren't. I mean, I'm not aware of those guys taking other jobs. I will say we did not get an explanation today. Like, we could get an announcement like we got last year, Erica, when Ken O'Keefe retired. What was that? Right before spring ball.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden now Iowa has an extra position available. They probably would promote Budmeyer, and maybe he becomes the passing game coordinator. So there could still be a change. There's time for these things. The only reason I brought that theory up is because Kirk was going to speak no matter what today. Like, signing day was not going to get pushed back simply because Brian hadn't gotten that call yet. So Kirk had to address it today. What else was he going to say?
Right, because he knew he would be asked about it.
He knew he was going to be asked about it. So what else was he going to do but give Brian a flying endorsement, while also acknowledging internally, hey, I'm going to endorse my son. And then if he finds a way to get a job, it ain't going to look bad for him. It's looking like he just left because he wanted to pursue another opportunity. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
Right.
But I don't think that theory is too foolish. Maybe
I'm not saying that it's like, oh my God, that's not ever going to happen. I'm not saying that. I just, as time goes by, and I think someone else, if it wasn't you, someone else said it, as time goes by, I'm getting less and less confident in Brian leaving. That's how I feel about it too. Whoever said that. So.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
And nobody's arguing that Brian's real hireable. I mean, we've said that a million times, that Brian is not very hireable. So, that makes it difficult for anybody to want to hire Brian Ferentz. But I believe the information that I've been given over the past few weeks, that those conversations have been had, and I believe the reports that I had gotten that indicated that Iowa was preparing for life after Brian Ferentz. So either that information was just flat out wrong, and I don't believe that's the case, or Brian hasn't gotten a job yet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to insinuate that you got any wrong information. That's not at all.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying maybe he won't get hired, but maybe he will.
Yeah, and too, like, you could have gotten that information from whoever your source is, and then 5 minutes later, the situation could have changed too. Things change all the time, especially in this era. So, I mean, totally. Like, I'm not saying anyone's information or accounts are false or any of that. But I wanted to talk about another comment. I believe it was Barta. Again, I was at work listening to it, so I'm pretty sure it was Barta who said about Kirk's long tenure at Iowa and his big sample size in that, and how that's a good thing. And that made me start thinking, like, when I was driving home, I was thinking about that comment, and I was like, is that truly a good thing, or is that a detriment at this point? Is that a problem? Is it a liability? I'm starting to think it is.
Is what a liability?
The fact that Kirk's been here for so long, because he mentioned about there's a big sample size for Kirk's tenure, and that he's been, he was making the point that he has all this good history at Iowa and that. Remember?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, Barta used that today to defend Kirk's track record, and that is an easy fallback when questioning Kirk's decision making. The easy way to explain why we're just blindly, well, I shouldn't say blindly, because he's gonna argue that it's based on substance, but our reason as an administration to just put our head down and put faith in the man who's the head coach of the football program is because he's proven himself over the last 24 years, and the program has been stable for the most part for 24 years. So I understand where he's coming from with that, but every era comes to an end.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's the end of the Kirk era, but to just say, well, we're going to forever we have confidence in Kirk. We're going to forever have confidence in Kirk because he's done great things for us for 24 years. I mean, that's just like, I don't even know how what to compare to that. That's Gary Barta forsaking his own job as evaluating his employees. I don't know. That logic doesn't make, like, what you did 20 years ago doesn't have any impact on what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you.
This is a sport of what did you do for me lately?
Mhm.
And sometimes, like Nebraska, I think is an example. Maybe programs make quick, decisions that are based on maybe more so emotion and quick reaction than anything else. But there are times when programs are slow about making changes, and all of a sudden, the program is driven into the ground.
Yeah.
And I'll say this about Hayden Fry. Hayden Fry left probably a little bit too late. I think he would admit that. I think Don Patterson might admit that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're on that road with Kirk. I really do.
And listen, Hayden Fry I've said this before, Erica. Hayden Fry's situation was different. I was barely even alive at that time. But when Hayden Fry, towards the end of his tenure, he was dealing with cancer. It was just a weird situation. You feel bad. You look back and you think, what does that do to you? You're trying to combat cancer and you're also trying to coach. I just can't, and trying to recruit and all these things. So I'm not giving him a pass, but this situation with Kirk is different, and I have too much love for Kirk Ferentz as a person to want to see him dig a hole for himself.
And that's exactly what he's in the process of doing, I think.
Well, he's not going to do. I really don't believe he's going to do it this year. That's the thing. Like, I think this is a long-term bad decision because, as I said earlier, I think they've got a good chance of winning 9 to 10 games, as is. As weird as that sounds, but my concern is what happens in 2024, what happens in 2025.
Yeah.
If Kirk wants to retire and sail off into the sunset after this season, maybe he'll do that. Maybe Brian will leave. And look, I don't think that's a very good time for a huge coaching change and a coaching search, but Kirk may do that and somewhat preserve his legacy from that respect. But I don't think he plans on leaving after 2023. So, it's a complicated issue for a variety of reasons, but I just don't want to see him dig his own grave as it relates to his legacy.
Yeah, and that's, in my opinion, I think he started doing that now. It doesn't take rocket science to look at what's going on, even as an outsider, especially as an outsider, see what's happening here and just be like, what's, like, without wanting to be funny, what's the upside? Like, what is the upside? I'm serious. What's the darn upside of leaving Brian as the OC other than he needs an income and he hasn't gotten an NFL offer yet?
According to Kirk, Brian is an exceptional offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I guess he and I will have to agree to disagree on that one. But so actually, Kirk out saying his welcome was next on the list, so we covered that already. I saw on Twitter as well, Rusty Van Wetzinga. How do you pronounce his name? He actually left or had a commitment to Southern Illinois, and he flipped to us. Can you tell us anything that you know about him? Because I just saw his Twitter post, and I don't really know much, except he was committed to Southern.
All I know, I haven't had a chance to really research him either. All I know is he had FBS offers from Charlotte, Army, Navy, but he's coming here as a walk-on. So I don't know a ton about him, but Iowa has had plenty of success stories as walk-ons. Whether he's a future linebacker, a future fullback, I don't know. But as long as Iowa continues to use the fullback, somebody needs to play the position. So,
yeah, as long as we're stuck in like 1980, that's fine.
there are times when you like having a fullback on the field, but I do think that's a little bit antiquated.
Yeah, for sure. That's pretty much all I had, I think, for today. And I think I did well staying calm and not being controversial. I made a real effort. I was like, when I call in here, I'm not going to start yelling because I know I've done that before. I'm not going to get overly, I'm not going to start swearing, none of that. But suffice it to say, I just think what went down today was insane. And like, I can't remember if it was you or a caller who said, for those who committed today or who signed today, the limelight's being taken from under them.
That is.
And I don't think that's fair. especially since we got some decent transfers and recruits here.
It's not. And I guess you could argue that Kirk could have gone up there and said, we're still evaluating. We don't have any updates. But
that would have been the high road to take. And there was somebody who commented in the chat, I've been watching the chat as well, about that this isn't, I don't remember the exact quote, but something about this isn't just about football, it's about integrity. And whoever that was, 150 million, I think it was this DDB. I don't know what that stands for, but that's the person's name on here. I 100% agree with them. You know, I mean, it's just disappointing. So anyway, thank you as always for taking my call. Hopefully I didn't offend anybody, because we have some sensitive people who can't handle the truth sometimes. Thank you again. Have a good night.
Thanks, Erica. Appreciate it. All right. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. We're going to be right back. One final break, and then we'll head into our last segment, taking your calls, taking your chats, your comments. We got a super chat. We've got callers on hold. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. Thank you for being here for the last 2 hours and 40 minutes. We'll be back with more in a second. Straight from the Man Cave, Kinnick Under the Kitchen, authentic, original player art prints are being drawn up for Hawkeye fans everywhere. From Under the Kitchen's Murray Legacy print, which features former Hawkeye Kenyon Murray, current Hawkeye Chris Murray, and current Sacramento King Keegan Murray, to football players Lucas Van Ness, Torrey Taylor, and Cooper DeJean, to wrestlers Tony Cassiope, Alex Marinelli, and Real Woods. Oh, and only one of the greatest athletes to ever compete at Iowa, Spencer Lee. There are so many options available, and they make great gifts. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook or at Under the Kitchen's new website. It's underthekitchen.square.site. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Check out Under the Kitchen today and get your authentic, original Hawkeye print. Appreciate Under the Kitchen. Randy Engel down in Mitchellville. Great artwork. That dude's talented, and he'll get you some authentic Hawkeye artwork for your favorite players. Don't punish the players. They get a portion of the, that's part of the NIL incentive, what Randy's got going on there. So great stuff from Randy down at Under the Kitchen. Of course, check his stuff out on Facebook and on his website. All right, super chat time from DC Hawkeye. Thank you, DC Hawkeye. Says, nice show, Corey. Thank you, DC, and appreciate you being here as always. Very much appreciated. Brian says, Corey, had to tell you I grabbed the What's the Upside shirt after the shout out in the presser. Thank you, Brian. Like your profile picture. Cool picture of Chris Street. Yes, thank you for grabbing the What's the Upside shirt. That is available. I should promote my merch better, right? We've got Hawkeye from the Hawkeye of the Storm merch. We've got That's Football merch. We've got What's the Upside merch. Great stuff. Thank you for the super chat, Brian, and for your Iowa from the Hawkeye of the Storm merchandise purchase.
Yes, sir.
All right, our caller on the phone line has been waiting for like 40 minutes. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout. Who's on the line?
Hi, this is Paul.
Hey, Paul.
So hold on, let me shut the television off. I'm
right.
looking at you in the wrong time.
You're good.
Let's see. Let me put my speaker on my phone, Corey, because I've got a couple of facts I'd like to share with you that's just not the emotion that everybody is kind of throwing out over and over.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Be patient 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, speak. Okay, here we go. So here's my thoughts. When I hear people, I guess, first of all, I'm going to say, in KF, I trust. I've watched him for 24 years, as we all have, and he has shown me time and time and time again, he is an expert at what he does. He's one of the top coaches in the country. When you hear other coaches talk about him, you never hear a bad word. And I go to a neurologist to have my brain checked. I go to a gastroenterologist to have my stomach done. I mean, these football coaches have so much more knowledge than any of us layman fans. I think it's arrogant for us armchair quarterbacks to sit back and think we know better than they do. And so I would just throw that out there. Number one, I don't think there's 13 coaches sitting in a room trying to figure out how can we best screw this up. And I think if it was all about Kirk keeping Brian, number one, I don't think Kirk would do that to his program. When you see him bust into tears over Jack Campbell, you know how much he cares about these players and his program. And I don't think 12 other coaches sitting in the room would allow him to torpedo the program for his son. Because if it's about his son getting paid $900,000 a year, they have so much generational wealth, the Ferentzes do, that his family's taken care of for years. So that's my twist on that piece. I'll just say I'm a fanatic. That's why I'm a fan. I'm a fanatic, and it's not about a coach. It's about the team. So I'll ride my Hawkeyes during the ups and during the downs.
Let me ask you a quick question before you hang up. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, because I got a couple bullets I want to share with you that I think would surprise fans.
Sure.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I'm just curious. You mentioned all the armchair quarterbacks, and obviously there's a lot of fans, a lot of opinions, a lot of emotional fans. I'll give you that. I'm not disputing that by any means. Have you watched our show with Coach Don Patterson?
Yes, I have. And
So
yes,
you'll
I
know
understand.
that you'll know that this show is based on. This is a call-in show today, right? We're interacting with the
Right.
fans, but
Right.
the lifeblood of this programming, this channel, is getting people who understand the sport better than I do, better than we as fans do, here to comment. Coach Patterson has been very clear on the offensive struggles. So we're going to have him on in the next couple of weeks. But anybody, I'll take Don Patterson's expertise up against just about anybody as it relates to quarterback play and as it relates to the offense.
I hear you. I absolutely hear you. I guess it's always, to me, it's the chicken or the egg. I think it's players. I think Spencer was below average. I think our offensive line was young and inexperienced. And we didn't have wide receivers. We had 2 leaving the portal. We had numbers get injured. You know, we were down to a number of 5, 6 receiver at a time. So I don't care what play Brian might have called. I don't think our players were able to execute to get things done. So some people may say it's Brian in play calling. I'm going to say it's players in execution.
Okay, well, here's my question. Why are there problems across the board personnel-wise? Who's in charge of recruiting? Who's in charge of developing? All those things.
And that's an entirely different question, which I agree with you.
How is that a different question? Hold on a sec. Why is that a different question? We're talking about we're talking about accountability. We're not just talking about play. I never have said the sole issue is play calling. It's a part of the issue, but so is development, evaluation, all those things.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's, but I see coaching players in the building differently than getting players into the building. So I could argue.
Okay.
I agree with you. Are we getting the right players in the building? But I think our coaches have shown that, I believe, opinion of one, that they coach our players up. I see our players get better. And if that's the walk-on who becomes the All-American or the 3-star that gets drafted in the NFL, I think we have talented coaches. But I'll give you your point of is it recruiting and is it who we're bringing into the building?
Okay,
so,
well, let's just remember. I know you're not denying this, and I appreciate you having a docile conversation and debate with me because, I've had people call in trying to argue in favor of, keeping Brian, and they're talking over you, and I can't have that. So appreciate you having a legitimate conversation with me. But
well,
let me
give you a couple numbers. I think.
Sure, but hold on. Let me just add one thing in here. I just want to remind you, and you know this, of course, because you obviously have followed Iowa football and college football for a long time. But recruiting is equally as important as developing as it is to play calling. So that's all part of the job description. So, I mean,
absolutely,
we're not just pointing the finger at play calling or at developing or evaluating. Recruiting is a big part of this too. And if the personnel there is either not performing because they're not being coached, and that falls on the coaches, or if they're not performing because they're not good enough, that's on the coaches for not recruiting well enough.
Yep, I agree. I hear you. So let me give you a couple other numbers. These kind of blew me away. The other day, I had a friend who's a huge Alabama fan sent me a thing that was on the Alabama website. The number of teams that have had 8 wins or more since 2015, 6 teams. Only 6 teams have won 8 games or more since 2015. Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State, and Iowa. So we can all yell and scream, "Oh my God, 8 wins," and we can't settle for 8 wins, and we think that's a low tide mark. Well, there's 125 other teams.
Well, hold on. Can you real quick? I don't mean to interrupt you. Can you read that list back to me again?
Yes, this is what was sent to me.
Yep.
From a Rick Webster's Twitter feed. Teams that have won 8 games or more since 2015.
Okay.
Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State, and Iowa. So I guess my point would be, of course we want 9 and 10 win seasons every year. Of course we want to be in the top 10 every year. But the reality is there are 131 teams with a lot of good talent, with a lot of good coaches. They're trying to do the same. And I would suggest we are doing some things at a very high level. I know we don't always win the West. I know we haven't won a Big Ten championship in a while. But when you put it in that kind of company, you go, man, that's pretty rarefied air in the last few years. Another number I will give you that kind of blew me away. The teams that have the teams, let's see, how do I say this? A list of the FBS teams that have had at least 10 consecutive seasons with a winning record. A list of the FBS teams that have at least 10 consecutive seasons with a winning record. Boise State, 25 seasons in a row. Wisconsin, 21 seasons in a row. Oklahoma State, 17. Alabama, 15. Clemson, 12. Georgia, 12. And then it's our Hawkeyes. So you look at that and you say, okay, where's Washington? Where's USC? Where's UCLA? Where's Nebraska? Where's, all the other Blue Bloods? Where's Florida? Where's Miami? Where's Notre Dame on any of these lists? So I know it's very easy to get emotional about our bucket maybe being less than full, but I just look at it and say, Kirk is in the top 4 coaches now in the Big Ten with Woody and Bo and Amos Alonso's bag. He doesn't luck into that after 24 years. You got to perform at a consistently high level to continue the tenure to have that type of success. And there's only 6 teams out of 131 that have won 8 games. And there's, what did I just give you? 8 teams that have had 10 years of winning record. I mean, those are some pretty powerful stats. So yes, I wish we had a better quarterback. Yes, I wish our offensive line was better. Yes, I wish we scored more points. And I don't think any of those things are up for debate. But if we step back and kind of step away from the emotion and look at some of the objective facts, man, our team's performing at a pretty high level that probably 120 other programs in the country wish they were performing at the consistent level we have over the last 2 decades.
So I'll tell you, I make sense of what you're saying. Let me respond with this. So you are clearly part of the fan base that is glass half full at all times, and that's great. I mean, being positive is fantastic in every aspect of life, not just when we're talking about college football, which really in the grand scheme of things means very little. But when you're looking at wins per season, right? You're absolutely right when you say that the majority of fan bases would love to have the stability and would love to say they've won at least 8 games for every year, minus the 2020 year where they won 6 because they didn't play a full schedule since 2015, right? That's that was the time frame we were looking at, 2015 to 2022, correct?
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, and you kind of stole my thought before I even said it. You brought up Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Michigan. I'm just curious, do you know how many combined conference championships those teams have combined?
Oh yeah, you're spot on.
I would guess I don't know this, and I've got Kyle who's waiting on hold. He's researching it, but I would guess it's around 20 would be my guess. Ohio State and Michigan have dominated the Big Ten. Alabama and Georgia have dominated the SEC. Clemson has dominated the ACC. Georgia, Bama, Clemson, Ohio State. Those are the teams. Those are teams that are winning national championships every single year. And Michigan's made the college football playoff the last 2 years. So when you bring up 8 or 9 games, you're absolutely right. The stability is incredible. And you have to acknowledge when you look at the numbers, which are data points and numbers, just similar to the numbers you just gave me, the numbers suggest that Iowa is not far off from being able to have success similar to those teams. That's the frustration. And you want to talk about emotion. You're right. It's emotional, but that is also fact. That's based on data. Iowa has a defense that can compete at the national level, and you have every right to feel happy with what Kirk Ferentz is achieving here and the stability over the last 8 years. But I'm just saying you got to be tolerant of the fans out there that say, look, it's great, but why can't we be great? Why is this so hard? We're so close, and yet there seems to be a satisfaction with being just good. That's where fans are. I don't think it's just emotion.
Maybe that's the definition of good and great. I'm going to suggest we're great.
Then now, what are those other teams that we just talked about that you compared Iowa to? What if we're great? Then what are those other programs that are winning championships?
So for example, in the two numbers I just gave you, Oklahoma's not on the list. Notre Dame's not on the list. Florida State, Florida, Miami's not on the list. Texas isn't on the list. Texas A&M's not on the list. Texas Tech's not on the list. Arizona, Arizona State, USC, UCLA, Washington, Colorado, Nebraska, Oklahoma. I mean, so we're talking about rarefied air, and I guess I would semantically say I hear exactly what you're saying, Corey. And can we be an outstanding program? Because in my heart, I believe we're a great program. Because there's 125 programs that are good, or less than that. So I don't know if you give that top echelon an A, those top 10 programs in the country, we get a B. But hell, there's a lot of country teams that are C's, D's.
Sure. Okay. There you just hit the nail on the head, and I respect your opinion, but I think what you just said is absolutely right. A B is not great. In no time in my years of attending any level of schooling was a B great.
Right.
But you're exactly right that lots of people, the people in the F range, the D range, the C range would love to have a B. But I mean, what Kirk did today, and he did the exact same thing you did, bringing up the fact that Iowa's been stable with 8 or more wins since 2015. You're comparing to Iowa to teams who have been A programs because they're winning championships. They're making the college football playoff. Iowa's not winning championships, and minus 2015, they haven't even been close. They've won 2 West titles since the divisions formed. What 2012? They won 2 West titles, and the one game, of course, in 2015, they were undefeated, very close to making the playoff. Got killed in the Rose Bowl, but they were still 11-2. You can't take that, or excuse me, 12-2. You can't take that away from them. But as you know, they got killed last year in the Big Ten championship game. So they've had 1 year where you could say that they've even competed for a Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that. And that's going to be difficult when you have Michigan and Michigan State.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Penn State's not even in what we're describing here. So now, in the other side of it is, come on, Corey, if you were a 4-star, 5-star, would you go to frickin' Iowa? I grew up in Forest City. I went to school at Luther. Okay, if I was a 4 or 5-star player, would I go find the sunshine down south?
Yes,
would I go to
probably.
Alabama to try and compete for a national championship, or at least know I have a better chance of doing it? If I'm a top-rated basketball player, am I going to Duke or am I going to Iowa if I get the call? So I guess I look at it again, glass half full, that our coaches are tremendous with what they do. And they bring in great players, and I think they've developed players. I truly believe they develop players. But you got to kind of separate that difference between outstanding and great, and some of those, because even some of those blue bloods, Notre Dame, Oklahoma. I mean, look what Nebraska. They made a wrong decision, 15 years ago, and they've went through how many coaches?
You're right.
5, 6.
Yes.
and they haven't done squat.
You're right.
They haven't done squat. So I get the emotion, and I'll finish on this note. I do agree with you. It saddens me when our defense, Phil Parker, there is no way he should not have been a Broyles Award winner somewhere along the line.
I agree.
And then you look at our special teams and what they've done. So 2 of the 3 phases, we are playing at an outstanding level. And it's frustrating that our offense does limit us from being a great team to an outstanding team, because definitely dragged us down. No question. But I would suggest it's been on the players more than the coaches, because I don't care what play Brian calls.
Yeah.
It's tough.
So I want to ask you, you said our coaches are doing a great job. Do you believe Brian Ferentz is doing a, quote, great job?
That's a good question, because I do think it's difficult I'm not standing on the sideline with him. Okay. You and I are standing at the sideline. He calls the play to run off tackle. Well, if you and I really know what the play call was, and you and I truly understood what the blocking patterns were, did Brian run the wrong play into the wrong defense, or did the guard and the tackle miss their blocks? And it's those kinds of things. I mean, I've noticed in games where Kirk will say it from the podium that our new freshman running back, he does a great job running, but he doesn't know what he's doing. Well, if you go back and look at some of the tape, and again, I'm an armchair quarterback, he missed key blocks on passing attempts where he didn't pick up blitzers. And now it looks like it's on the offensive line or on Petrus, because Petrus didn't have time to make the throw. Well, it's because the freshman back was covering the wrong side and didn't pick up the blitzer on the other side. And, so I think it's really hard for us to determine, again, chicken or the egg. Did Brian make the wrong call, or the players not executing the play?
But again, their lack of execution ultimately boils back to coaching.
That it does.
And recruiting.
That it does, which then, to your point, that goes back up to recruiting.
Well, but partially, but not completely. So right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
And by the way, I'm just going to say this. I appreciate Kyle giving us this information. Let me just read this to you. I know you know this already, but those 5 teams that you compared Iowa to, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, Michigan, those 5 teams have 22 division titles since 2015. They've got 20 possible conference championships. In other words, they've been in conference championship games. 14 of the possible 16 national championship game appearances, and 6 of the 8 possible national titles.
So let me ask you a question. What's the biggest difference between Alabama, Georgia, and Iowa? What's the biggest difference?
Well, let's throw Michigan. Why don't we throw Michigan and Ohio State in the mix? I know what you're going to say.
Okay,
you're going to say recruiting base and proximity in the country, locale. I get you're going to say that.
Yeah, I'm going to say 5 stars, because it's amazing what we're doing with Jack Campbell.
I agree.
Out of high,
I agree, but Jack Campbell plays defense.
Jack
Campbell plays defense.
Yes.
Where are the success stories? Where are the success stories of developing 2- and 3-star guys at wide receiver, at quarterback, at running back? Where are the success stories there?
Well, I'll go back to my point earlier that if I'm a Duke caliber basketball player, am I coming to Iowa?
Then why are no, I understand that, sir. But what I'm saying is
Alabama.
No.
If I'm an
you're
Alabama
touting
quality.
You're touting Iowa's ability to develop. You brought up Jack Campbell. He's a 2-star guy. They didn't need to recruit a 5-star guy to get a 5-star player because they developed one. They're not developing those guys on offense. They're developing them on defense. They're not doing that on offense. So if your theory is correct, then you would just say, okay, well, we should be able to develop like we do on defense, but they don't. They don't develop skill position guys, minus tight end play.
So to the conversation we're having, is a piece of this Doyle? Because I agree with one of the callers typed in at the bottom. There may be, is it coincidence that since Doyle left, our offensive line has taken a couple steps backward? And is it physicalness? Is it toughness?
I'm not going to debate that. I think that's very possible that he's a part of it. I acknowledge that. I've said that you and I are not going to argue on that point because I think that's possible. I will say though that the narrative that Iowa runs the ball well for in throughout Kirk's tenure has been incorrect, has been false. And even go back to 2019, they were porous.
Yes, I agree.
On the interior of that line. And Chris Doyle was still a part of the program then. So I don't know that argument completely holds water. I think there's a lot of reasons for the issues. Brian Ferentz is not the only problem, but I'm simply saying, how else do you evaluate an OC if you're not recruiting well, you're not developing your talent well, you're not your total offensive rankings are porous. Basically, every metric out there has been terrible these last 2 years. How else are we evaluating? You say, well, we're not in the sidelines with them. Well, what other piece of evaluation? We're supposed to sit back and just listen to Kirk say, well, I've evaluated him, and according to my metric system, he's doing great.
Now, maybe I misunderstood, but I was listening to the Hawkeye, is it Hawkeye Hotspot with Doctorman?
I don't know. I don't listen to it, so you might be right.
Okay. Scott Doctorman with The Athletic. He broke down Iowa offense all the way back to like 2014. And if you look at, I think it was in 14, 15, 16, 17, we were like a number 50 offense. When we had Hawkinson and Fant, we were number 6 in the country in red zone offense.
I believe that.
It goes a little bit back. I'm sorry?
I said I believe that.
And it goes back to players. Now is that Hawkinson the 2-star that got developed, or Fant the 4-star that was a stud?
Tight ends. Tight ends.
Yeah. Yeah. I get where I get frustrated, but I understand my frustration is that if I could do one thing to make Hawkeye football better, it'd be on the offensive side of the ball to get some 4- and 5-star skill players. And I just don't know if I'm a skilled player, I'm going up to the Midwest in the snow, in a pro-style offense, in a small little white state, that just, I don't know. I think it's very difficult to pull some of the skilled talent players in that we obviously haven't gotten for years and years and years and years and years.
And I don't disagree with you on that. And the last thing I'll say, because I do need to move on, and I appreciate you having a conversation with me in a dignified manner. I agree with you that is difficult. That's a difficult ask, but I do not believe that it's impossible to recruit substantially better than this staff recruits. I do believe that there is that what Don Patterson has said on this show about how Iowa, there's no sports team, there's no pro sports team in Iowa, and it's like the Dallas Cowboys of Texas. There is something to be said for that. And yes, the weather is bad, but the weather is also bad in Michigan at times, and weather's been bad in Nebraska, and Nebraska was a dynasty in the 90s. I know things have changed. I get that, but I don't necessarily agree with the idea that we just have to throw our hands up and say, well, we're never going to get 4- and 5-star recruits, so we might as well not even try. As long as we don't make a change with the coaching staff, you're never going to know, because we've had the same coaching staff recruiting or not recruiting those skill position players for the last 24 years. So we'll never know who's right or wrong on that until we get a change.
Let me give you one last 30 seconds. I'll be brief and I'll get off.
Okay.
Not to defend Barta, because I've never met the man, but just looking from a distance. Okay. Look at Lisa Bluter. Tell me how successful that program is. Look at Kirk Ferentz, all the numbers we just talked about. Look at McCaffrey. They just won the Big Ten championship. Look at Brands. They're always top 1, 2, 3 in the nation. Look at what track has done recently, baseball, even women's soccer. So I hear people can get upset about Brands because I think we get too caught up in the nepotism thing. Because my humble opinion, I do not believe Kirk or the coaches in the room would allow him to keep his son on board if his son was not, I don't know, not good. But I say just step aside again and look across the Iowa athletic program. And I have a hard time naming any other Big Ten school that is performing across the major sports consistently like we are. So again, I've never met the man. I don't know Barta from a hole in the ground, but I think objectively, if you rationally looked at how those teams have performed, they're always in the top number. I think they've done a good job. So I'll hang up with that.
And, real quick,
I love your show.
What did you say your name was? Did you say your name was Brian?
Send you anything offline?
What was your? Did you say your name was Brian?
No, this is Paul.
Oh,
Paul from Forest City, Paul from Luther. So,
okay. Well, good to meet you, Paul, and I do appreciate you having a civil conversation with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any way to send you anything offline or email or?
You mean like a message? Is that what you're talking about? Information or what?
Yeah. Well, I've got a number of these little stats that I think are pretty enlightening. That just like the one I just shared with you about Alabama,
Sure.
or the number of seasons, staying over 500.
Yeah, my
powerful.
Twitter DMs are open, so that's primarily how I communicate with people.
Perfect. Gotcha. Thanks, Corey.
So,
Great.
Thank you,
show.
sir. Well, that was interesting. That was an interesting. I know people in the chat are not happy. They wanted me to hang up. He was having a respectful conversation. I don't agree with most of what he stands for, but I understand his perspective, and that's a perspective that some fans have. I think he's in the minority. I do think he's in the minority now. Let me get through a couple super chats here. Lemanski, thank you for this. Dear Mr. Barta, high on the mount of indecision lie the bones of millions who in the sight of victory paused to rest, and resting died. Please retire. Dear Mr. Barta. Thank you, Lemanski. Appreciate the super chat. Takun or Takin, I'm sorry I missed this until now. This is not my intention. I got your super chat, but I've got a million messages here I'm trying to siphon through. Want to start off with some positivity. I've been watching you all year, Corey. Thank you for all your hard work and dedication. And at least now we know the line, as long as we win, Brian stays. Thank you for that, Takun or Takin. I wish I knew how to pronounce your handle. Appreciate that super chat, ma'am or sir. Very much appreciated. Let's move to Brian. I think we grabbed it. We mentioned this one already about the What's the Upside t-shirts. Yes, they are available right now. Merch link in the description below. Erica, so the coaches are making bank thanks to our money, and we can't criticize. You can't be serious. You're blaming recruiting, etc. Who's in charge of recruiting the players? I will say, football program, the Kirk Ferentz apologist, Erica, would tell you, and they're right, that the coaches are not paid with tax dollars, but still a public institution, and I don't disagree with what you just said. DC Hawkeye, nice show, Corey. Thank you. Appreciate that, DC Hawkeye, and thank you for being a generous supporter of the show. I've been on here over 3 hours. I knew it was going to be a long show. Didn't know if it'd be this long, but last few calls have gotten me riled up. I appreciated this comment in the chat. Let me see here. Where is the comment? I really appreciated this comment in the chat. If I can possibly find it. Brian says, I'd like to point out, like a good running back, Corey gets better in the fourth quarter. So if you ever watch Derrick Henry run, the guy gets better in the fourth quarter. I agree with that, Brian. I've always been impressed by that. So I agree. I've kind of loosened up a little bit, and I think part of it is I'm a few hours removed from that press conference. I think the first couple hours of the show, I did feel like I was kind of struggling a little bit because although I do try to be objective on here, and I've made my stance very clear, even in non-emotional moments, it is easy to get upset. And, again, there's so many things in this world that are bigger than football, but you invested in Iowa football, and it's part of my work and it's part of my pleasure. So yeah, you get a little emotional, and that can affect you. Thank you for that comment, Brian. I did enjoy this. I did enjoy the laugh. Dom, thank you as well. Okay, Erica, this caller's arguments don't hold water. And she adds, why should we limit ourselves to mediocrity? Thank you, Erica, for the 2 more super chats. And you know where I stand on it, Erica. So can you imagine if I let should I do that? Should I let 2 callers debate? Like if we had Erica on hold and I brought her in with that guy on the phone, can you imagine that? Just all melee breaks loose on this show. That'd be great. Mike, thank you for the super chat. How big of a super chat do you need to hang up on this clown? The only reason I'm reading it is because it's a super chat. I'm not calling Paul a clown. That's Mike who said it. But I appreciate the donation, Mike. And it would take a lot more than $4.99. Forgive me, especially since YouTube takes 70%. 30%. YouTube takes 30% of super chat donations. Just a fact. Thank you, Mike, for the super chat. JT says, well, no, this is not a comment, but thank you for becoming a YouTube member JT, appreciate you becoming a premium subscriber. You can do that by clicking the join button next to the channel name. Am I missing any super chats? If I missed your super chat earlier, please let me know, and I'll try to find it. Brian, I missed this one. Brian says, "How did we do offensively when we only had Sam Brownlee in the running back room?" See, that was what, 2000? Was that 2002? That was so long ago, man. I was like 6 years old in 2002. Seriously. So, I'd have to go back. It was somewhere around there, right? 2002. They were actually a really good offense, but I'd have to look at the data points, the stats for that year. All right, let's get to, appreciate the super chat, Brian. Let's get to Kyle, who's been on hold forever. And thank you for doing your research, Kyle. during the last football.
Well, that was an interesting little conversation to listen to, but we do have to let him know that he did do his research, but research goes both ways. So we have some of our own as well.
And I know people are going to say, well, Corey, you always fall back on Coach Patterson. Yes, I do. Because when people say, well, you're an armchair court, you don't know what you're talking about. Have you ever played Division I college football? No, I haven't. But again, that's why I love having Coach Patterson on, and we're going to have him on, because I don't know how unless you're, I'm trying to think of unless you're like Nick Saban, or unless you're like, how are you going to argue with what Coach Patterson, how is a fan going to call in and argue with what Coach Patterson has to say?
I listened to that man talk football for about 5 minutes, and after that I said I'm going to defer to him forever. It doesn't matter what his titles are. All you have to do is listen.
Coach Patterson has forgotten more football while sleeping than we have learned football in our entire lives. I believe that, honestly. And that's why, again, this show would not be this show unless it was him. This is a show with just the callers, but this would not be here if it wasn't for Coach Patterson. Anyways.
Yeah. So I'm
your comment, Kyle. Can I just get to the super chat?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Don't let me debate on air. I spent too much on beer studying in Iowa City. Thank you, Lemanski. Appreciate the super chat. He's given several today, so I appreciate that. All right, Kyle, what do you got?
Okay, so I want to frame something for you just to have a little bit of fun here. If I told you, okay, you're Corey, you could be the head football coach, you could be the offensive coordinator, whatever. Just imagine you're in that position, all right? If I told you you're game planning for a team, and this team is coming into town, and this team has the 129th ranked offense in terms of yards per game. This team averages 14 points a game and is 128th in scoring offense. This team has 170 yards per game through the air, which is 120th nationally. And they rank 100th in rush yards, which is, I think, 115th or 117th nationally. They have They have about a 75% chance of scoring one or fewer touchdowns. How would you feel about preparing for that game?
Well, if that's all I knew, I would probably feel pretty good, because it's hard to, I would think it would be almost impossible, not impossible, but next to impossible for that other team that I don't know much about to have a defensive unit that could possibly make up for the inadequacies of the offense. That would be my take.
The team that I just described is if you take Iowa's defensive stats and you put them on the NCAA offensive charts. So that's what you get if you take Iowa's yards per game allowed, points per game allowed, passing yards per game allowed, rushing yards per game allowed, and you flip it, instead of putting it on the defensive charts, you put it on the offensive charts. That's what you get. So that's the average offense that we play on a week in, week out basis.
So that's why it sounded eerily similar to what the Iowa offense is doing.
Yeah.
Basically,
every game that we play. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say the formula is winning close games, right? That's what they did all year, is they won close games. So as great as the defense is, it's almost impossible for the defense to be so good that you blow teams out because the offense is that bad. The only way you're going to win games with that bad of an offense is by playing picture perfect defense and winning close games. And somehow some way Phil Parker and LeVar Woods have pulled that off.
Yeah. And again, I saw those stats and like with them flipped on the offensive charts. And literally the thing that occurred to me is like our defense is so good and our special teams are so good, but that's different. But our defense is so good that we're essentially playing Iowa's offense every week and we still can't win 10 games, 11 games, go to conference championships, etc.
Well, see, what you just said though is exactly the point. And you brought up special teams and dismissed it, but that is, we're basically looking at apples to apples there when you compare, again, what Iowa's defense is allowing, what Iowa's offense produces. So what's the tiebreaker? Why is Iowa winning more than they're losing? It's special teams. They're winning that unit almost every week too. And as Don Patterson has talked about, more often than not, the analytics say across the Big Ten landscape, if you're winning two of the three major units, you're going to win most games. And that's what Iowa does. As bad as the offense is, they're winning two of the three units. So the coaching staff has said, as Kirk said today, they're really not interested in changing the offense because they can get away with it because the other two units are elite. That's basically what they're not interested in really upgrading the offense. That's basically what they said. It's not like Kirk went up there today and said, I believe Brian's going to make this offense really good. He never said that. I don't think he believes that's the case. He believes that they can be better than what they are, and that'll be good enough.
Yeah.
In fact, he believes what they're doing is good enough, right? Because he kept pointing to the 8-win marker. So, that's the standard.
And I guess, I personally think the special teams is down to LeVar Woods' great coaching, but I guess our previous caller would probably say that it was just players making plays, right? Because when players miss blocks, it's not on coaching. So when they make good plays, it can't be coaching either, right?
Right. And he did comment on Phil Parker. So if we're going to give Phil Parker credit, shouldn't we also give Brian Ferentz substantial blame?
Exactly. And the only other stat that I saw there too, because Barta was asked about the scoring offense the last 2 years, and he said something along the lines of, I may misquote him slightly, but he said something along the lines of like, I think something getting lost in all of this is like we've had 2 rough years, but the 4 years before that we actually did all right scoring wise. And then he referenced that we scored in the mid-20s for the last 4 seasons in points per game before the last 2 years. And the funny part about that was he told on himself because he didn't realize in saying that comment, because 25 points a game doesn't sound too bad, but if you go back and look at those years, they were in the top 40 once, and they averaged worse than 70th nationally for those years. So he's saying, I've got these 4 years to back up this dude. He just had 2 bad years, but his 4 good years were average.
You're giving me points per game numbers?
That's points per game, and that even includes defense.
Right. So do you have the numbers in front of you from go back?
I can pull them up quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. Pull up because we always talk about total offense, and then people always debate me on it, and that's fine. It's not the perfect metric, but I would be curious to hear because I haven't looked at this recently. But if we're going to talk points per game, which is not the perfect metric, let's at least have an upfront conversation. Does points per game support the cause that Brian has done well? Because basically, Kirk put Brian in the same boat as Phil as far as performance today. That's basically what he said. Yeah.
So I've got him at 40th in 2020. Just in the top 40, 39th at 31.8 points a game.
I'm not taking it away from him. It was a COVID year. They ran the ball exceptionally well. Wisconsin was awful. It was weird. I'm not taking that. You can't put an asterisk there, but you kind of do. It was just Michigan State was terrible. They were on the schedule. Iowa didn't have to play Ohio State, didn't have to play Michigan. Penn State was bad that year. It was a weird year.
I would argue too the biggest disqualifier about that year is going on the road and not having to play in road environments. It's a lot easier to score points without the opposing crowds to disrupt signals and all that kind of stuff that Kennick does to opposing teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they
absolutely a factor.
So then if we go to the previous year, 2019, they were 79th in the country at 25.8 points a game. So that was 2019, 2020. 2018, 2019. Oh, there we go. We got back in the top 40. So I was wrong. They were 39th again at 30.6 points a game. So that's all right. But that was the Fant Hawkinson year that the caller was talking about, where we were The anomaly was we were good in the
we
red
can't
zone.
throw that out. We can't throw that year
Yeah.
out. But we also have to remember the numbers that you're reading right now are also relative to the defense scoring and special team scoring, right? So there's no question the offense is better. Nobody's debating the offense was substantially better in 17, 18, 19. What we are arguing is that it was not I don't even know what the numbers would be if you were to take out. Is there even a stat out there that takes out defensive and special team scores? I'm not sure there is.
No, but you could argue. I mean, we had those last certainly 2020. You could argue Charlie Jones had 2 or 3 punt returns. 2021, I know he had a kickoff return and a couple punt returns.
2021, the first game of the season, they had 2 pick sixes from Riley Moss.
Yeah, exactly.
That's anecdotal evidence. I understand that. What I'm saying is those numbers, if you just look at those numbers flat out, that would indicate, okay, those offenses were decent. They weren't top 25, they weren't top 30, but they were top 50. You said 2018, and what was 2017?
2017, 2018 was
probably better too, because they scored points that year. It was the Ohio State game, the Iowa State game.
If you include the Ohio State game, which had a pick six in it and 55 points, they were 59th nationally at 28.2 points per game. So with a big anomaly game, and they still didn't do that well.
Well, they also scored. How many scored against Iowa State that year? Again, you're not throwing these out, but they scored a lot of points against Iowa State that year.
So they essentially had 2 high-scoring games, and then they averaged like 19 points a game the rest of the season.
Yeah, they scored in the 40s against Iowa State that year. That was Nate Stanley's first road game. Anyways, so we're not throwing those numbers out. Those are a factor, but you have to acknowledge the fact that it's a really incomplete statistic when you factor in the fact that you have defensive scores, special team scores, and points per game. You have to balance points per game. Anybody that, besides Kirk, anybody that I've talked to with an offensive or hurt, Chuck Long's an example. I brought him up on a number of occasions. Obviously, Don Patterson. You have to weigh points per game, points per play, yards per game. Those are all valid statistics, and you can't just look at one that is convenient. And that's what I was doing there, saying, well, this is the most favorable stat for us to look at.
Yeah.
And, why is it favorable? Because it takes accountability away from the person who is probably there in the first place because he is Kirk Ferentz's son.
Well, and I think it's interesting too that when you have an offense that's that bad, you do have to cherry pick stats a little bit to make it look somewhat reasonable. And of the stat that they cherry picked, they're in the top 40, which is hardly, tearing up the country, but top 40 is all right, but they're hardly in the top 40 at all in the stat that you cherry pick to make yourself look good. Like that's, I don't know. And if you can't cherry pick a stat better than 39th in the country, it's not good enough.
It's the best metric they have to support their cause, support their argument. So that's what they're going to use. But if you look, minus the Hawkinson Fant year, 2018, where they were really good in the red zone efficiency these last couple of years has been absolutely awful. Yards per play has been bad. Yards per game has been bad. Points per game has been bad. I mean, you go down the list, it's all been bad. And honestly, 2 years is a pretty decent sample size in and of itself. But it doesn't even sound like, that wasn't even the argument from Kirk today. It's not like he said, well, 2 years is not long enough. We need to give Brian another year. No, he's just saying we're okay with how he's performing.
Yeah.
It's the players, right? It's the players. They're the reason why we haven't. You heard me, Kyle. You probably heard Mark and I talking about this Tuesday. We said this is going to happen. We said this is probably what Kirk's going to do. He's going to blame personnel. I can't believe it. But part of me can't believe that theory was right. He blamed personnel, and that's just unfortunate because I think it painted the wrong picture. I don't know if Kirk intended to do that, but it appeared to me that he was throwing players under the bus, and I just don't think that's a Kirk Ferentz thing to do, and I think it's a desperation move because what else do you blame at this point?
I didn't get that, and that point keeps getting brought up about like the offensive line and all the stuff, all the struggles they had, and all the bad plays they made, and it's like, man, like, and I know it's completely different, but like if I'm a swing coach in golf and my player has a terrible swing, like, and I've been coaching him for 4 years, does that land completely on them or does that land on me? Like at a certain point, that lands on me as a coach.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's that whole press conference and some of the stuff that was thought to be logic by them it just blew my mind.
Yeah, and so what's ironic? So is this stat correct? Thomas commented earlier. He said, let's see, 40th at 32 points per game in 2020, 99th last year. So he's not talking about 2022, but 2021, 99th. And then what was the number for 2022 points per game?
So they were 94th in 2021 at 23.4. It was 94th, and then
99th
it was 94th, and then this year it was 117th at 18.6.
Yeah, and by the way, to this commenter, I saw this earlier. He hopes all of us negative, miserable sobs have to eat crow. I've said it so many times. I don't want this team to fail. I hope I do eat crow. I hope that we're all wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm not acknowledging that they're not going to be better. I've said that. How many times have I said that now? They're going to be better on offense, but the ceiling on the program remains intact as long as there's not a change. So that's my stance.
Yeah. I hope we're on season wrap up live stream next year talking about a Big Ten championship, but I don't see it next year if we have the same staff, regardless of.
Well, I see them at least making the championship game, and anything can happen in a championship game, but
you're not going to Vegas and putting money on them.
No. And Circle Herc, he says, if winning matters isn't a good enough excuse, what is? How about how many spots does Brian Ferentz offense need to move up before it's considered successful? Again, are we looking at total offense, or what are we looking at? Now there's this big debate about what the perfect metric is. I think collectively those numbers need to average out to probably being top 50 to say he's doing a good job. If he's top 75, maybe you could argue, okay, he's good enough and they can probably compete for titles that way. Again, I'm talking collectively, not just points per game. Top 100 ain't good enough. I think they'll be top 100, by the way. I think they'll probably, I think they'll be in the 9. I'd guess like right now, as of personnel right now, probably in the 90s.
Yeah.
I could see them being in the 90s somewhere, and I'm talking even maybe in total offense. But ultimately, I just don't buy into the personnel argument. So
yeah, talking about those points per game number too. I mean, they only allowed 14 this year, and if you take away the points that the defense and special teams scored, then your differential that the offense needed to score to break even was 11.5 points a game. So they scored 18.6, including defense and whatever. But if the offense scored 11.5 points a game on average, you would expect something around a 6-6 season. So, it just shows you how much they can get away with. If that's all they need, I mean, based on that metric, they probably only need an average of 16 to 18 offensive points a game to go 9 and to have 9 wins, maybe something like that.
What happens if Cade McNamara enters he can't enter the portal. I guess I don't know how that works. So I guess he could enter the portal after spring. What if he enters the portal after spring?
Then we go 4-8.
Well, what's the reaction from the fans? What's the reaction from Iowa if that were to happen? That won't happen.
I can't even imagine. Yeah,
he's not going to do that.
He's not walking away from that amount of money, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of money, here's another thing that I thought you'd find interesting. If you go back in the Iowa State salary records, they show it shows all the assistant coaches pay year by year, so everybody can go and see it. As of 2 years ago, Brian Ferentz was getting paid more than Phil Parker. Brian Ferentz was getting paid $860,000 in 2020, and Phil Parker got paid $101,000 in 2020 of salary.
You're sure on that? You're sure on that?
I just went back and looked at it, and I could not believe my eyes. And the thing about that is, not only is Phil Parker more successful, but he's been the DC since 2012, and Brian Ferentz has been the OC since 2017. So it's not like it was a longer, It wasn't a 10-year thing. It's not like he built up salary because of years of experience. It was why I don't understand that. Why is that? Now that again, he got a contract boost. Phil Parker did, and Brian Ferentz really didn't. I mean, he got a little bit, but so
across the country, offensive coordinators typically make more than their counterpart. Would be my guess.
Yeah, probably.
But again, it's ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
That's comical. But
he's also been on the staff forever. He's not just been the OC since 2012. He's been on the staff forever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Both of them have been on staff for a while. But I saw the other thing I saw about the salary that was funny was about this year was I think there was an article in the Athletic or something or one of the outlets that said I don't know if this is at the end of the season or if it was like 2/3 of the way through the season, but I copied and pasted this paragraph for you. I think it was maybe 8 or 9 games into the season. He said, based on the amount of money that Brian Ferentz has been paid for this section of the season, that amount comes out to over $64,000 per offensive touchdown, $5,000 per first down, $225,000 per passing touchdown, 90,000 per rushing touchdown, $300 a yard, and $1,200 to play. So your reaction to how we're spending our money?
Wonderful spending. Whoever the accountant and the money management people are, they need to raise themselves. So
I just I hope that number gets back to the donors and all of the great people of Iowa that pay state taxes that go into this stuff, because that's I don't know if that was
the situation at Iowa is somewhat fragile. If somehow Phil Parker retired tomorrow, or if Cade McNamara entered the portal after spring, or if LeVar Woods left for a job somewhere else tomorrow, there would be people in full panic mode with Iowa football. And I think rightfully so. That's how fragile the situation is, given the inadequacies with the offensive staff.
Yeah. What do you think it would take next year if Phil Parker stays, Cade McNamara stays? What type of performance do you think it takes to get to that level of panic without like losing any of those people? Like, how bad do they have to be offensively for it to get to that level of panic?
If they're, well, again, what metric are we using? If you're just looking at total offense, I think if you're not top 100 with Cade and with the upgrades, I mean, honestly, I think you got to be top 75. I don't think it's top 100, even top 75. I say that's not great.
I was going to say if we take out the expectations for Iowa and the past of Iowa, I would say minimum top 50. Like if I didn't know anything about Iowa in the past and about Brian, I would say you got Cade, you got Eric All in the portal, you got a couple good O linemen. I'd say top 50, but
I agree.
I don't know. We'll see. Until they win 5 or 6 games in a season, nothing's going to happen.
Real quick before you go, Kyle, can you read the username and the comment here?
Furry gotcha kitty girl forever. Says
Thank
Phil
you.
Parker needs a raise.
Did you read that? And now you can go.
All right. Sounds good.
Appreciate you, Kyle. Thank you, sir.
Have a good one.
All right. Let's we're about ready to wrap this up. In a minute, we got James as our last caller of the night. Again, if you're interested in donating to the channel, Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, you can donate by credit card by means of PayPal. I've been on here for 3.5 hours, so any of the donations, they're all appreciated. We've had plenty of super chats today. Appreciate that. But you can donate by means of any of that. And of course, you can sponsor the channel by emailing me from the eye of the storm at outlook.com. All one word, from the eye of the storm at outlook.com. Steve, wonder if Carson May went to the portal because he never got in the bowl game. Did he find a new home yet? He's going to Coffeyville Community College, which is a power at that level. But my guess is that's a stepping stone somewhere else. I wouldn't be surprised if another major program said, hey, we want you to be here a year. We don't have scholarships, but if you can perform admirably here, we'll take you next year. That would be my guess. Just speculating. Scott says, what lawsuit? Well, the lawsuit that Brian Ferentz is named in, the racial discrimination lawsuit from 2020. That's still pending. Alan says, should they have hired Gaddis? Well, Gaddis's morals might be in question. There are rumors that he was involved in some finagling, some immoral activity at Michigan. If that's the case, maybe not, but there are plenty of potential candidates out there. Eric says, hypothetical, do you take Kirk at head coach with Brian as OC at OC, or do you take Brian at head coach with Bud Meyer at OC? I would take the first. Brian as the head coach would be the end of everything. And by the way, John Budmeyer doesn't have some great resume. He may be a great guy, maybe a great coach. He coached for 1 year as the OC at Colorado State, was a quarterback's coach at Wisconsin prior. I'd still take Kirk as the head coach. Hawkeye fan, what never gets addressed in your show is how Iowa will get the recruits necessary to play in the playoff. The only programs that have better records are the top 15 recruiting classes. Then recruit better. I don't buy into the narrative that Iowa can't have top 15 recruiting classes. I don't. Some people believe that. I think that's a defeatist attitude, but I just don't buy into it. I think we have a defeatist attitude as it relates to recruiting. Go Hawks, says Corey. What are your thoughts on why Kirk doesn't go for 5-star recruits? What I just said. Defeatist attitude as it relates to recruiting. Now, he does go after some, Proctor being one. Yeah, Xavier Wampa was a 4/5-star kid. I think it's having a defeatist attitude, frankly. And you know, I know that they feel like they're wasting their time on guys who aren't going to come here. But I believe that's having a defeatist attitude. Lucas says, I could perhaps join the conversation. This was a long time ago. Lucas, you were in the queue, I'm sure, so you would have gotten on if you hung tight. Take the calls in order as they come. Brian says, do we have any rumors about Nick Jackson, the Virginia linebacker that visited Iowa this past weekend? I would expect to hear from him within days. It's down to Iowa and Oklahoma, reportedly. So we'll see on Nick Jackson. They could use him. Eric, does McNamara stay past next year if he is reined in and stifled by all the coaches all year? Yeah, I mean, we'll see what the NFL scouts think of him in a year. But that's a good question. Don't know. He could go back in the portal if he chose to. But yeah, I just don't know. And I don't know exactly how that works. He's a graduate transfer now, but well, is he a graduate? I guess he's not. I guess he hasn't graduated. He's only been at Michigan, what, 3 years? I don't think he's graduated. So he could be a grad transfer potentially. So great question. Paula, just joined. You may have already discussed this, but why would an NFL team want Brian with a lawsuit hanging over his head? Who wants that sort of bad press? Maybe that is the real reason there is no change. You're probably not wrong, Paula. I think efforts have been there for Brian to leave, but if he can't get hired, Kirk's not willing to fire him or do anything different, then he's stuck here, and that's a sad situation. DC Hawkeye, remember last fall when they were 3-4, you said that you weren't wishing them to lose more, but losing was the only way to lose Brian. You were right. All right, folks. Well, it's been a fun few hours. Thank you all for being here. And if I missed your show, or your show, man, it's been a long show, 3.5 hour show. I got to wind down. I got other stuff I got to get done. Folks, there are things bigger than football, and I'm going to be here regardless. So stay with it, and we'll keep plugging along. Let's get to our final caller of the night, and then we're going to say sayonara for the evening, and we'll see everybody for Iowa postgame with Coach Gary Close on Saturday, and, of course, continuous coverage moving forward. James, welcome to the show.
Sorry, I would have been earlier, but we had practice from like 4:30 to 6:30, so I kind of was busy.
Good,
I listened to the press conference before I left my house, and I was like, I texted you, and it was really frustrating me because, like, it was frustrating me. The fact that, like, he just bringing up, like, and you might have already talked about this, but, like, the numbers where he's like, first off, he brought up 24 points per game. We didn't even get 24 points per game last year. So where did he get that number from? I have no idea. And I was so confused. It's like, bro, why are you talking about 24 points per game when we didn't even score that on average? What are you talking about?
He's talking about their record when they do score 24 points per game.
Yeah, but we didn't get that at all last year. So we didn't average that last year? So why is that number relevant? You get my point?
Yeah, I kind of do. Yeah.
Like, why is that number relevant if we didn't get there? We didn't average that at all last year. I don't understand how the number was relevant.
Yeah.
And then
thank you. Yeah, he is a grad transfer. I'm sorry. You're right, Taylor.
Okay.
Thank you. He is a grad transfer. Anyways, go ahead, James.
And then he kept bringing up the fact that, like, what he did the year, like, in the middle of the season was like, we won 10 games last year. We won 10 games last year. We won 10 games last year. He kept saying that. It's like, that's not the answer we want. We just want improvement. Like, this team could compete for higher up. They could win Big Ten championships if you guys will focus on trying to make the offense better. But I don't feel like that's their focus. And like you were talking about earlier, where you're saying he was putting players down, that's why players have transferred. Deuce Hogan.
That's why some players. You're right. That's
Perry Roberts. That's why they've all transferred, because they feel put down by a coach. And yes, he does stick up for some guys, but they feel put down by him. So that's why some of them transfer, because they feel like they're blaming them and not the coaching staff, when the coaching staff is not helping them be what they need to be. But yet he's blaming the players instead of the coaches.
You're bringing substance. You're bringing dynamite, James. Can't argue with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I just feel like we'll see. Obviously, I feel like Cade committed here knowing Brian Ferentz is going to be the OC.
Do I think that?
Yeah.
I no, I don't. I'm
Don't?
guessing they didn't. No, I'm guessing I could be wrong on this, but if there was no promise made to him that Brian's moving on, and I said earlier in the show, James, there's always a chance Brian still gets hired in a week.
Yeah, I heard you talking about that like when I was in my car and I was listening to it. But I was just saying, like, even if he knows that there's a chance he could stay, he's still committed knowing there's a chance he could
Correct.
stay.
Yeah.
So like he knew this possibility.
I think that's true, and the money talks sometimes. I think that's probably what happened, but I think he was probably told we may have a change here. We're going to make major changes, but I think that dollar amount spoke to Cade McNamara. Why else would he come here other than he's going to be a starter immediately and he's getting paid?
I agree. And you talk about recruiting, how we don't recruit 5 stars. There is we do go after some 5 stars, but I feel like I looked at something where it's like, I don't know if you've seen this, the fiscal year where basketball spent more on recruiting than football. And I feel like that's because Fran is willing to, yes, he might not get the 5 guys, but he's willing to go after them. He's willing to spend to try to get them.
Yeah.
When Kirk doesn't spend the money to try to get them, he just stands pat. That's why they spent so much more, because Fran's at least willing to try to go get people. Even if he doesn't get them, he's still willing to try.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. I've said that for a long time. That's what I appreciate about Fran. I know that he's not perfect. He's got his issues with defense.
Yeah, I know it's ain't basketball, but I was just bringing that up as like a measuring point for what I was trying to say on the recruiting end of it. But
yeah, you're right.
Do you think there'll be improvement? I mean, I think there'll be improvement next year. I feel like they got some better players, and the fact that, like, I think Cade's better than any quarterback we've had since probably.
Yeah, I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be substantially better, but I mean, substantially better. I mean, going to the
can't get much worse.
Going to the portal and doing what they did was something that needed to happen, but there's also a couple other things that need to happen that apparently are not happening. So
one more big question I kind of had too when I was thinking about it. I was listening to Tyler Barnes speaking. He was talking about connections. To me, I don't know if any other program is this way. They might be. I don't follow any other program. Right? I'm Iowa through, so I don't follow any other program, right? But he brought up like the Dejon Parker connection with Kayvon Merriweather, the Cade McNamara connection with his brother being recruited by him, the Rudy Feth with George Barnett being his coach. Do you think Iowa leans too much on that when going to the portal? Like, they don't try to look for somebody, they try to look at the guys they got connections. So I'm not saying they're good fits, but I feel like sometimes they just look at too many connections and not, oh, well, did we just have a connection with them? Not that, oh, they might help us. It's just, oh, we got the connection.
Right. Yeah, you could be right. I think there's maybe some truth to that. Iowa does tend to navigate towards guys from lower levels because they feel they have a better chance with them and guys they have connections to. So maybe, I mean, why not go after some guys that they have no connections to but are qualified to help the cause? I think that's a fair point.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see, and obviously I hope we do better. But remember, me and you did talk about this last year at the point where we said the only way Brown was going to be gone. The other guy said the only way Brown was going to be gone was if we lost, and I think we were right. So,
yeah, we've said that. I mean, exactly right. They won enough games to defend it.
Yep, and I knew that was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. And also, one more thing, I found it was funny too. Like when they asked him a Brian question, he was just so avoiding it. He wasn't even answering the question. He was just rattling off numbers that like came out of the atmosphere. He's like picked them out of the sky, like, oh, I'm gonna bring up this number, I'm gonna bring up that number that weren't even relevant to the thing. He was just saying words just to say words. And I'm like, Kirk, this is not a good look. You're not even defending your son or anything. You're just saying gibberish. Like, you're not saying anything.
I hear you. I hear you. Yes.
But all right, when does basketball play? Is it Saturday or Sunday?
Saturday 1:30 on Fox. We got Iowa women on Thursday.
All right. Well, enjoy your night, and I know it's been a long night for you, so get some rest, and I'll see you on Saturday.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it. All right, folks, few reminders before we go. Thank you all for being here. And again, please hit the like button on your way out. Hit that thumbs up. Please subscribe. If you're interested in sponsoring the channel, reach out to me. Email me from the eye of the storm at outlook.com. That's from the eye of the storm at outlook.com. Donate to the channel by means of Venmo, Cash App, PayPal in the links below. Also, follow me on Twitter at From the Hawkeye. Also at From the Hawkeye on Instagram. From the Hawkeye of the Storm on Facebook. Please share this show out on social media. If you've enjoyed the content, others will as well. You can become a premium subscriber by clicking the join button next to the channel name here on YouTube. shop Amazon with us. We've got a link. That's another way you can support the show. Click on the Amazon affiliate link and shop, do your shopping, and we'll get a small portion of the proceeds. And of course, you can also check out our merch from the Hawkeye of the Storm merch. Click on the link in the description below. We'll be back for continuous coverage, folks. Thank you all for being here for the last 3 to 4 hours. And, of course, check our almost daily. We won't have daily content. We're heading into the off season. Of course, we've got basketball, but as we're in the off season of the football, no guarantee we're going to get content on a daily. But I would say at least weekly content we're going to continue to have here. And if there's breaking news, we'll be here to talk about it live. And we've got Iowa postgame with Coach Gary Close. Awesome show, folks. Love having Coach Close on the show. We'll have that following Iowa, Illinois. Big game Saturday will begin at 1:30 p.m. Central Time on Fox. We'll talk to you after Iowa and Illinois. Go Hawks tomorrow. The women hopefully taking down the Hoosiers of Indiana. Hopefully better times ahead for football as well as it relates to the offense. We'll talk to you soon, folks. Have a great night.